This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
The London Assembly is the voice of London, composed of 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor in order to hold him to account and to scrutinise his policies. This is a Mayor's Question Time meeting of the Assembly, which means that all members are invited to attend and ask questions of the Mayor. Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the gallery and watching on the webcast? And we have a gallery. Good. In case of emergency and any need to exit the building, guests seated in the public gallery should follow security staff and Assembly members should follow the meeting clerk. Please may I remind you to silence your devices, and can I ask the Mayor and members to position their microphones so that they can be heard clearly, moving it closer to you by picking it up from the base if required. Members are reminded that any electronic devices should not be placed in front of microphones and must be turned on to speak, and please remember to turn it off once finished. Members are also reminded to turn off any mobile hotspots for the duration of the meeting. Can I now ask the clerk, Rebecca Arnold, to confirm any apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence today, Chair.
Firstly, can I welcome to the public gallery Democracy and Comparative Politics students from the University College London. Are you there? Wave. Hello. Good. This is how it's supposed to be done, just for your information. So, on behalf of the London Assembly, I would also like to congratulate all members of Parliament who were elected in the general election. May I point out that we've got now quite a cohort of members of Parliament who were Assembly members, and therefore I do hope that that will result in even better communications with the other place. I know that the Assembly will also join me in congratulating former Assembly member Caroline Pidgeon, MBE, who has been appointed to the House of Lords. I mean, there's a decision. It was well deserved, and it's a kind of decision. I mean, they would have been mad not to, really, wouldn't they? Absolutely bonkers. During the pre-election period, the London Assembly held away days and informal meetings to hear from relevant senior GLA officers and experts to agree their work programmes. The Budget and Performance Committee met with the GLA finance team. Members of the Economy Committee visited the Chamber of Commerce and spoke to a variety of external stakeholders. The Environment Committee went to the London National Park City Visitor Centre. Oh, that sounded like a nice day out. The Fire Committee spent some time with the London Fire Brigade in their headquarters at Union Street. There were discussions between the GLA Health Team and the Health Committee, and the Housing Committee visited 2 community land trust sites in Lewisham. I was privileged to be able to be on that, and they were quite fantastic places. The Planning and Regeneration Committee met at the London School of Economics, and thank you to the LSE for hosting us on that occasion. Members of the Transport Committee received an informal factual briefing from TfL on the Mayor's transport strategy, and the GLA Oversight Committee met formally to discuss the GLA's latest workforce report and to hear an update on the GLA's Job Families work. Finally, on these notes, I kind of wanted to pay a tribute to 2 very long-standing members of the GLA staff. Our Security and Operations Manager, Alex MacDonald, is retiring after 20 years of exceptional service at the GLA. I'd like to thank Alex on behalf of the Assembly for his work in keeping Assembly members and this building safe. I talked to Alex earlier, and I understand the GLA's loss is golf's gain. So, you know, there's a lot lost to golf, isn't there? Also, Silvana Campbell, the GLA's Lettings and Events Officer, is also retiring after 23 years at the GLA. I know that many of our teams have received invaluable support from Silvana when organising assembly events, and we thank her for her service. I think, as far as I was concerned, she was part of the fixtures and fittings of the GLA, and one of the most frightening women I've ever talked to. And in a nice way, Silvana, if you're listening, in a nice way. I know members will join me in wishing both Alex and Silvana a happy retirement.
Yeah.
We'll now move on to the declarations of interest. Can I ask the Assembly to note the interest set out in item 2? And do Assembly members have any other disclosable pecuniary interests which relate to the items on today's agenda for this meeting, or any other relevant interests, including any declarations in relation to gifts and hospitality which are not reflected on the authority's register of gifts and hospitality? I usually like to give people a few seconds to reflect on whether or not something's happened before. No, that's fine. Go on. Can I ask the Assembly to confirm the minutes of the London Assembly's annual meeting, such as it was, on the 10th of May 2024, and the London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meeting held on the 23rd of May and 20th of June to be signed by me as a correct record? I'm distraught that post-election MQT wasn't the quickest. I tried it. I tried to make it the quickest as possible, but I think it was about 9 minutes or something like that. We'll now move on to the Mayor's report. Can I ask the Assembly formally to receive the Mayor's report covering the period from the 7th of June to the 4th of July 2024? Thank you. The Mayor will now provide an oral update of up to 5 minutes in length on matters occurring since the publication of the report. Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Chair, can I associate myself with your remarks in relation to Silvana and Alex MacDonald? They're two good examples of public servants dedicated to serving our city and serving politicians of all political persuasions. Can I just spend a few moments speaking about Alex, whose job to keep us safe is a really important job when we look at the context of what's happening in America, here and elsewhere. I appreciate I've made his job much harder by being the Mayor over the last 8 years, but can I wish him all the best in his new ventures, playing golf 7 days a week. But genuinely say to both Silvana and Alex, thank you very much from all of us for the hard work over the last 2 decades plus. Chair, this is the first Mayor's Question Time since our nation had its voice heard at the general election, and it is second since London had its voice heard at the mayoral election. I had the honour and pleasure of meeting our new Prime Minister last week alongside mayoral colleagues at Number 10 to discuss the future of our cities and regions. We're of course only at the beginning of this Parliament with the King's speech only yesterday, but I'm pleased to report this new administration has made it clear that it intends to govern very differently by prioritising relationships with all of England's mayors. In fact, I spent earlier this morning with the Transport Secretary at Lou Hay. I believe we now have a government in Westminster that is on our side, not in our way. And while we can't ignore the tremendous harm that the previous government inflicted on our economy and public services over the last 14 years, I remain hopeful for what we can now achieve for Londoners by working together. I look forward to answering questions during the course of this morning.
No indications? No. We now move on to the questions on the priority order paper. Now, each group is allocated an amount of time to ask their questions that is proportionate to their size. Can I also alert members to the fact that one particular subject will come up repeatedly, I think, in questions this morning, and so there is a potential for members to trample on other people's questions. And you can treat that as you want. You can either choose to ask your question or you can ask a supplementary on that. So please don't be offended if you find that half of your question has already been answered. The first question is government commitments from Assembly Member Garrett.
Thank you. Good morning. The election of the new government less than 2 weeks ago is incredibly exciting for London and the rest of the UK. We now have a huge opportunity to work hand in hand with the government to build a fairer, safer and greener London, and use the power and potential of our cities across the UK to deliver national renewal and the change Britain needs. Last Tuesday, our Prime Minister invited UK mayors to Downing Street to discuss plans for our cities and regions, including local growth plans. The meeting was also attended by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner. Not once did the UK mayors and I meet with the previous Prime Minister or his predecessor. Within its first 4 days, we had more genuine engagement and serious discussion with this government than we had during the whole of the last administration. To quote Ben Houchin, Mayor of the Tees Valley, the Prime Minister was, and I quote, fresh, energetic and keen to get on with things. And what a change that makes. Our new Prime Minister will be putting country before party in a way that the last government never did. The new government is moving fast, announcing a vast legislative agenda for change yesterday in the King's speech, which included an English devolution bill, looking at more devolution, and announcing the establishment of a Council of the Nations and Regions. So much has happened that you'd be forgiven for forgetting that the government's been serving for just 13 days. But as the new cabinet open the books and speak with civil servants, it's clear they're only starting to get the full picture of the dire inheritance they've received following 14 years of neglect and failure. It's very clear from the conversations I'm having with the Prime Minister and Secretaries of State that this government will do things differently and will work closely with London because they know this is the key to turbocharging growth across the country. But given we're barely 2 weeks in, it would be wrong to give a running commentary on our engagement and negotiations with government. There's no doubt that the previous government held London back. London can now go from rowing against the tide of government obstructiveness and party politics to having the winds of this new government at our backs. I, for one, welcome that change, and Londoners clearly welcome it too.
So 2 hours, 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and not a single mention of any of the 4 very specific things that I had in my question. That might be some kind of record. So we have had the manifesto, we've had the election campaign, we've had lots of speeches, we've had post-election announcements, and we've had a King's speech, and control of private rents in London and control of suburban rail in London, which you have been asking for years, which you must have lobbied your colleagues in Westminster about for years. There's no commitment on either of those, giving you either of those powers, is there?
It's been 13 days. I mean, the idea that within 13 days...
No, it's been years that you've been asking for them, and there was nothing in the manifesto, nothing in the election campaign, and there have been announcements on rent, announcements on railways, and it seems to me to carefully rule out the things you've been asking for.
It's been 13 days. We're talking about undoing the damage of the last 14 years. I think the Prime Minister's been quite clear in relation to the inheritance this government has got from the last government.
It's got nothing to do with granting you powers. It's not a financial question, it's a power question. Should you have the powers over suburban rail or and private rents in London? The previous government thought that you couldn't be trusted with those powers. It seems to me the new government thinks the same. You have not had a commitment from your Labour colleagues that they will give you those powers, have you?
Well, it's clear that the members learnt nothing of the lessons of July the 4th and May the 2nd, when London and the country rejected their prospectus in terms of the Mayor of London.
Yeah, but you're not. I think what the members noticed is that you're not answering my question.
Please allow the Mayor to reply.
I would love him to reply, Chair. Love him to.
You won't believe they've suffered the worst defeat since records began in terms of London elections and the general election, the arrogance and pomposity of the member. Look, it's been 13 days. I think the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, Ministers and the Civil Service have made a fantastic start in the first 13 days as a sprint. I'm looking forward to working with them on a whole host of issues.
Okay, so they've snubbed you on rent control and on control of suburban railways. After the last election, you wrote to the then new government saying that you needed £49 billion, needed was the word you used, £49 billion on housing over 10 years. That was what you told the last government you needed. Have you made the same demand of this government?
The letters I've written to members of the Cabinet have been letters to ask for meetings with them to discuss a variety of issues, but I was really pleased even though I didn't ask
I'm
for
sorry, but I don't need to answer at cross purposes. The letter that I'm talking about, I have right here, it makes a very specific demand. It says, the Mayor, that's you, sets out the evidence for what is required to address London's housing crisis. Quote, the government needs to provide £4.9 billion per year over 10 years. That's the demand you made of the previous government, first few months after the election. Are you making the same demand of this new government?
Well, I think, Chair, in the member's own question, he referred to the first few months of the last election, not the first 13 days of the last election. I know he wrote the question before he received my answer a few moments ago, but I'm quite clear. In relation to the first letters I've written to members of the government are asking for meetings with them. By the way, I never had the courtesy of meetings with members of the previous government who were in the cabinet, but I'm really pleased. 13 days in, I've had a number of meetings, and they'll lead to conversations about the sorts of things our great city needs.
Okay, I think it's apparent that the government is snubbing your powers, your request for powers, and you have massively dialed back your previously ridiculously excessive requests of the government because that was clearly political grandstanding, not a serious request. I will keep watching to see whether these new requests appear. I have a feeling they might not. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Hall, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Keir Starmer has said that he wanted to hit the ground running. Fair enough. And I saw a minister last night that said that they'd been working on plans for months and months. Therefore, I'm surprised that you haven't got your requests in there while they were all working during those months. And that's in relation to what Assemblymember Gareth has said. I mean, the previous government gave you £64 million to recruit 1,000 additional officers last year, police officers. And as you know, the Met that you're in charge of, was the only police service in the country to lose this money because they couldn't recruit the numbers of officers needed. So if you couldn't recruit 1,000 officers last year, how on earth are you going to recruit 1,300 officers this year, which you said you'd do if you got a Labour government?
Well, firstly, the minister you heard last night was talking about the months and months of work that went into drafting the manifesto. Now, the results on July the 4th mean the government has a mandate to deliver that manifesto. What happens now, as someone who's served in government, is the government works with civil servants to put into action the plans in the manifesto, and that takes some time. So, for example, you wouldn't have heard in yesterday's King's speech 40 separate bills mentioned, more than any time since 2005. Every single piece of policy in the manifesto is a 5-year parliamentary term. Secondly, in relation to police officer numbers in London, we've recruited more than 6,000 police officers over the last 3 years. The promise I made in my manifesto was to recruit an additional 1,300 police officers, PCSOs and specials over a 4-year mayoral term. And I'm confident we'll keep that promise like I have all the others I made in 2016 and 2021.
So how many officers do you think that we'll end up with?
I would hope we'd end up with, by the end of my mayoral term, north of 35,000 police officers.
North of, OK. And are the government going to reinstate the £64 million of funding that went back into the government?
Well, it's been 13 days since this government took office. I've not had a chance to meet with the Home Secretary to discuss the issue of finances. What I do know is Sir Mark Rowley and I agree that London needs more investment in police in London. We've just seen this weekend the activities in London, why we need additional police, and I'll be making that case to the new government.
Well, I go back to my original point. I'm amazed that you didn't have some of these deals sewn up before the election. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Moema.
Thank you, and it's really great to see you, and a resounding success in May. We're all really pleased to have you back for your 3rd term. But I wanted to ask you about one commitment that the Labour government made in the King's speech, and that's around the Renters Reform Bill. Are you pleased to see that the Labour government, I was going to say party, the Labour government is planning to ban no-fault evictions over this year?
I mean, this renters' rights bill is incredibly important. For 14 years, we've had nothing from the government in relation to security of tenure. There was a previous Conservative government, Margaret Thatcher's, that deregulated the housing market, brought in assured tenancies, which means if a private tenant raises an issue of damp or mould, he or she can be evicted for no reason at all from a landlord. And what you've heard in the King's speech yesterday is 40 bills, one of them around renters' rights. And I'm so excited. Why? Because it'll make a real tangible difference to Londoners you and I serve, who've complained about the consequences of being made homeless, the consequences of poor housing, and it'll really make a big dent in relation to the issue of security of tenure and the life chances of families across our city.
Thank you. I think there's a little bit of issue with the timer, which we're resolving now. The next question concerns tackling crime in partnership with the incoming government, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Desai.
Thanks for your question. The election of the new government will help us to tackle crime in the capital and keep Londoners safe. The Prime Minister's mission-based approach has crime and safety at its heart, and this is accompanied by ambitious targets, including halving violence against women and girls and halving knife crime within a decade. Now that we have a government willing to work together with City Hall, we'll be able to go further and faster in helping victims and preventing crimes happening in the first place. The new government's neighbourhood policing guarantee could mean up to 1,300 more officers in London, operating on the front line and working with communities on the issues that matter most to them. The government's also committed to finally and fully banning zombie knives and machetes. The previous government delivered nothing but empty promises, and as a result, too many of these knives are still on the streets of London. The government's focus on violence reduction and commitment to creating a network of young futures hubs is also a real positive. This approach of being tough on the complex causes of crime aligns with the prevention and early intervention work of the VRU we set up in London in 2019, the first in England and Wales. In London, we're leading from the front and bearing down on violence in all its forms. In addition to receiving support and investment from the new government, there are many examples of best practice in London that could be replicated and scaled up nationally. As Mayor, I look forward to working hand in hand with the new government to build a safer London for everyone and to help deliver the change that Britain needs.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Mayor. Working hand in hand with the new government to deliver a safer London. You said it all. Mr. Mayor, I've got two questions to ask you. Firstly, we have seen an alarming and unprecedented level of intimidation and harassment of political campaigners in the recent general election. One example that comes to mind in my constituency, amongst many, is abuse, vicious at times, that Rushna Ali, now the Member of Parliament for Bethnal Green and Stepney, received. Mr. Mayor, do you share my deep concerns about this trend, and how will you ensure a London perspective is fed into the Home Secretary's work that has now started to address this worrying problem?
Look, can I say it's quite a thing? I speak about all of you. That citizens put themselves forward to stand for political office, whether it's council, the assembly, the mayor, parliament, or whatever. It's quite a thing to put yourself forward. We know the risks we take in relation to reputation, finances, livelihood. Personal safety isn't one of the things that we think about, or we used to think about, in terms of being a politician. And then we've got some brilliant volunteers of all parties, by the way, who put themselves forward to deliver leaflets, to knock on doors, to canvass. I think it's unacceptable that either candidates or volunteers, members of our parties or activists, should be intimidated. It's not the way to have free and fair elections. There are too many examples across our country in recent years where this has happened. I lost a dear friend during a campaign in 2016, Jo Cox. She lost her life during a referendum campaign. And you gave one example with what Rushnara went through. I witnessed that myself in relation to your seat. I campaigned across the country. I witnessed it in other parts of the country as well. I'm really pleased that Yvette Cooper has taken a lead on this in relation to the rapid review she's instructed to happen and the task force work that's going to take place. But we've got to make sure this is the last election where things are as bad as they've been. I fear, that it may not be a case of things improving because some of the characters who've been elected aren't people who want to unite our communities. And I think they should just pause and reflect on the impact it has on not just their own safety, but the safety of volunteers, activists and members of all our parties who give it their time for free because they believe in democracy.
Thank you for the answer. Will you discuss this with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, what complaints he has received, what action is being taken, and more importantly, what lessons can be learned?
So without breaching confidences, during the campaign I was contacted by candidates and I passed that on to the police. It's an operational matter. It shouldn't be for me to interfere with those issues. And the police, the amount of resources the Met Police Service diverted in the campaign is phenomenal, the most ever. And it goes back to another issue in relation to a question raised by somebody else about resources for our city. You know, if this is going to be, inverted commas, the new norm, has an impact on not just whether candidates put themselves forward, whether people canvass and campaign, but on police resources as well. But it is an issue that's of concern to the Commissioner and the police. And by the way, police forces across the country, not just the Met Police Service.
Thank you. The next question concerns transport priorities for London, and that's in the name of Assembly Member Russell.
Thanks for your question. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to work in a positive way with the new government. This new relationship will bring opportunities for London's transport network and associated benefits for national economic growth. As you'd expect, one of our priorities will be working with the new Secretary of State for Transport. Together, we have the opportunity to deliver the change London and the country deserves. I met with her on Friday, and this morning was out and about with her in London. And I'm hoping that leads to a change in, the support we receive from the government. We know that the whole country succeeds when London succeeds, and vice versa. Protecting and building upon our capital's unique contribution to national growth will help the new government achieve its missions as quickly as possible. There's no question that the previous government held London back and massively damaged our public services, notably in its failure to give our transport network the certainty it needed with a multi-year capital funding deal. Such an agreement would give a massive boost to growth, jobs and productivity in London and the rest of the UK. TfL's investment in the UK supply chain in 22-23 alone was worth £5.9 billion in gross value added in the UK economy, supporting more than 100,000 high-quality jobs across the country. I'll be working with colleagues to ensure we secure a funding settlement that reflects the needs of our city. We're working with the new government to see what's possible and when within the constrained financial situation they've inherited from the previous government. We also know that the government will be creating Great British Railways to bring the railways back into public ownership after 14 years of neglect. We'll be discussing how this can work with our transport network in London, the possibility of further devolution, as we've seen success with on the London Overground, and ensuring that all services are as integrated as possible so Londoners get the best service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, you were talking about a lot of these opportunities in terms of growth for London, rather than talking about specifically your transport targets in your transport strategy. Now, last week, Seb Dance was very candid with the Transport Committee, saying that you're not on course to meet your interim targets for 80% of trips to be made by walking, cycling and public transport by 2041. And he talked about it being obviously an overarching priority to get back on track to meet those targets. So I'm just wondering, what are you going to ask from the government to help you get on track with that 80% target for trips to be made by sustainable methods by 2041?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thanks for your interest in this really important issue. So I'll give you an example of us. The visit today that the Transport Secretary and I had was on Superloop. So the Superloop is a good example where in the first year alone in outer London, it's led to more people using public transport, the active travel you talk about. So when you look at bus usage in London, it's gone up by more than 2%. Across the country, by the way, there's been a dip in bus usage. On the Superloop, it's gone up by more than 11%. So that's an example, Caroline, of people going to active travel because there's an alternative. Yep. And that's what we need to do, provide alternatives to people, whether it's safer cycling, whether it's Superloop 2, and other issues to make it easy for them to use the active travel they need.
I completely agree that you need more investment in those big-ticket transport items like new bus routes, new opportunities for people to make journeys by public transport, and that's absolutely part of the 80% target that you've got. But there's something that's a lot more kind of essential, which is giving people the chance to cross the road safely. So I was in Croydon earlier this week at a junction where it's a big highway, two big main roads crossing each other, and there are signals for traffic, but there's no signals for people to cross the road. And while I was there, people were literally just coming and talking because they knew that it was really worrying that they couldn't get across the road easily. All the people came out of an office to have a chat about it because their office overlooks the junction and they see near misses all the time. So what I'm interested in is this really basic stuff about helping people get across the road, that kind of investment. We did a motion on it back in 2021 about these junctions like this where there's signals for traffic but no signals for people to cross. And what I'm wondering is, are you going to be having any discussions with government about more funding for London to deal with these really simple, basic essentials on our roads to make it safe and convenient to cross the road and get around on foot as well as by bike?
Well, the good news, and you'll appreciate this because you're always fair on these issues, is there's been a big increase in pedestrian crossings in the last 8 years. We need to go further. A lot of these communities have been designed for the car. The London Borough of Croydon, which has the largest population of any borough in the country, is a good example of a borough ostensibly designed not too long ago for the car. And by the way, we've also got to think about how buildings are designed, having stairs in a convenient place for people to use rather than hidden away at the back. So we're looking at the whole issue of design on not just roads, pedestrian crossings, how pavements are widened and so forth, cycling lanes, but also buildings as well to get more active travel.
Okay, I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to leave it there, but I am going to be talking to you a lot over the months and years ahead about these really simple things that help people to do the right thing and get around under their own steam. Thanks very much.
Thank you. The next question concerns keeping Londoners safe during the summer, and that's in the name of Assembly Member Roberts, please.
First of all, could I thank the Assembly Member for visiting Twickenham Fire Station last week. It makes a big difference when members go and visit our stations, supporting the London Fire Brigade's water safety campaign. This vital campaign raises awareness of the dangers of open water swimming and gives Londoners advice on how to stay safe, as the members are well aware. Early in the summer, the London Resilience Forum convened a seasonal preparedness briefing for senior officers at City Hall with our police, fire, ambulance service and other Category 1 and Category 2 responders and community representatives setting out their key risks and mitigation measures. The briefing allows for better awareness among critical partners and provides assurance to the chair of the LRF, as well as relevant deputy mayors, that agencies are considering and managing seasonal impacts on their work. Although this may seem surprising given the recent weather, the Met Office 3-month outlook indicates that the chance of a hot summer is higher than normal, which means heat-related impacts are more likely. The Fire Brigade has put in place weekly strategic forecasting meetings to highlight key risks and ensure it can respond appropriately to potential high-demand situations like weather warnings. With funding from City Hall, the LFB has introduced 30 wildfire tactical advisors, specialist vehicles, holy hoses, and a new fleet of command units to protect Londoners. They were on display at a training exercise in Wanstead last week, as Londoners may have seen on the news. The Met Police has policing plans in place, including increased resources around events, protests and reducing violence during the summer. The London Ambulance Service has taken steps to meet additional demand by increasing staffing during peak demand times and working to ensure crews can hand over patient care emergency departments as quickly as possible. All emergency services are working in partnership to share safety messaging with the public. 2 weeks ago, the London Resilience Unit conducted Exercise Helios, an exercise exploring an extreme heat scenario of 5 days above 40 degrees. And this was a recommendation of the interim London Climate Resilience Review, and I'm pleased that over 80 attendees participated. And work on our London Surface Water Strategy also continues. We've already implemented changes following the 2021 summer floods, including better multi-agency coordination in monitoring, communicating with the public and incident response.
Thank you for that answer. Today marks the second anniversary of the death of Brian Sazu in the Thames at Teggs Island. He was a young 14-year-old boy, left school early, just went down to enjoy the river with his friends. Can you use the power of your office to create a campaign of voices that young people will listen to in order to warn them of the dangers inherent in irresponsible use of the Thames?
Oh, firstly, for those who don't know, the member sent, when he attended the fire station, pupils from Year 7 from Brian's school also attended, as did the family. So there really are campaigns in place. I'm more than happy to use our offices to add any value, to amplify, to do whatever it takes to make sure more people know about the risk. And you'll be aware that when it's hot, people get tempted to jump into open water, reservoirs, rivers, and so forth. And anything we can do in terms of public education, more than happy to do. And any ideas he's got, please feel free to contact my office and we'll take them up.
Thank you. On that note, in summer 2023, following the tragedy, there had already been a waterside responders scheme which had been rolled out in Twickenham and Richmond. And you said that this was going to be rolled out with the London Fire Brigade as a whole across the entire capital, in order to ensure that waterside businesses were aware of how they could help. Has that happened? And have you got any numbers as to how many businesses have signed up to this scheme?
I'm afraid I've not got it in my briefing, but I can take that away and come back to you as soon as possible with the answer.
Thank you. And finally, there has been, and it was mentioned and launched at Twickenham Fire Brigade last week, the rescue poles. We already have the throw lines, but there's a trial going on in Richmond and Hounslow, I understand, of rescue poles. If that trial is found to be successful, will you commit funding to ensure that those poles are rolled out across London?
Yeah, yes. I should just explain that one of the things I've sought to do as the Mayor since 2016 is to make sure the Fire Brigade gets the resources it needs. So if the operational advice from the Commissioner is this works, let's roll it out, we'll find the money to roll it out.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Assembly Member Bakari, please.
Thank you. To continue on the theme of being prepared for the summer, as you've mentioned already, there was an event on the 19th of July in 2022 classed by the LFB as the busiest day since World War II because of soaring temperatures and increased wildfires. And do you honestly believe that the LFB is able to manage that situation again, and what measures have you put in place?
Well, I set out some of them in answer to Gareth Roberts' question in relation to the investment we've given to the LFB, 30 wildfire tactical advisors, specialist vehicles, the holy hoses, a new fleet of command units, and other things we've done as well to support the London Fire Brigade. Look, the short answer is London isn't ready for the extreme weather that coincides with the impacts of the climate emergency. We're not. So the London Fire Brigade, for example, have boats and dinghies and so forth when there's, surface water flooding caused by, 2 months' worth of rain in 2 hours. When you and I were younger, we wouldn't have joined. I was younger a lot than you were. You wouldn't think about joining the fire service to do with floods, right? You sort of think it's about putting out fires, but that's now the job of the new fire service. So the short answer is yes, we've learned the lessons from the busiest week since the Blitz, Second World War, but no. We've not done all that we can do to
I really appreciate your honesty there, because I think that there needs to be honesty about the fact that we do need to prepare. And as a result of the 2022 wildfires, LFB did make 15 recommendations, which included equipment, safety messaging, training courses for the LFB staff. These messages were again repeated by international experts that we had at the Fire Committee last week. Can you give us an update on those 15 recommendations? How many of those have been fully completed? And of those that haven't been completed, what have been the major barriers of preventing faster progress?
So the LFB is not only learning lessons from, for those that don't appreciate it, so obviously other parts of the world have this on a regular basis, so we can learn from them. Why not copy rather than inventing from scratch? So all the recommendations are either in tray or are being acted upon where resources allow us to do so. Some of it means us negotiating with the government. We're also, just to reassure you, learning from other parts of the country. So when you think about London, bear in mind the urban sprawl, you don't think about wildfires, right? But actually we had more wildfires in London than any other region in the country. But we are learning from those parts of the country where there's more greenery and stuff. And so, all the recommendations will be acted upon. They're either in tray or are being completed.
So we've still got work to do. I mean, one of the major barriers that was identified by the Assembly was funding, particularly when it comes to investing in equipment and PPE. Are you happy with the levels of GLA funding towards the new equipment and training? And are you confident that the new UK government will prioritise the funding of equipment to tackle wildfires?
No, I'm not happy with the GA funding. I think it's too much. I think we invest £20 million more than the Home Office says we should. We shouldn't be doing that because the Home Office should be, investing more. What I've done is learn the lessons from the mistakes made by the previous mayor, who closed down fire stations, got rid of appliances, and reduce the number of firefighters. I've done the reverse of those things. At the same time, investing in lessons learned from Grenfell. We have doubled the number of tall buildings as the rest of the country put together, but also learned the lessons of terrorists. The London Fire Brigade respond to terrorist incidents, London Bridge, Westminster Bridge, etc. At the same time, adapting to meet the needs of the challenges posed by climate change. It's really difficult in relation to making the books balance and so forth. The LFB Commissioner is doing a brilliant job in making sure that he can meet the needs of our city with the finite resources we have. And one of the issues I'll be raising with the new government is the issue of resources for the fire brigade in London. We have now the most professionalised set of firefighters in the history of firefighting in this country, but they need the right training, the right kit, the right tools. They've got to evolve and adapt, just like the challenges they have evolve and adapt as well.
I would like to see some more pressure from you towards the government, because I think there is a lot more funding that, definitely the FBU have been asking for. Now, despite the increase of wildfires, there is actually no overarching strategy for managing wildfires at a national level. In England, there have been 4 national fire and rescue framework documents, but wildfires are not referred to directly in any of these documents. The FBU have called for a UK wildfire strategy. Is this something that you can support? If so, will you be lobbying this new Labour government to implement this wildfire strategy?
So Chair, the criticism in the question was I'm not lobbying the government enough. The criticism from the Tory leader was I lobby the government too much. They can't have it both ways. Now this
I think this is an important question. We need to have a UK-wide strategy. You must agree with that.
The new Fire Minister has been in post, I think, for 10 days. But I'll be making sure that the government's aware of the concerns we have in relation to a whole host of issues when it comes to safety, including the issue raised in relation to wildfires.
I'm going to end with this last question with you. You made a response in February 2024 where you stated that there was no additional cost to attending wildfires. Do you still stand by that statement, given the costs associated with training, equipment, additional staffing that we've just been discussing?
It's the cost of a fire plant going to a wildfire is the same as the cost of a fire plant going to a fire elsewhere, I think is the point of the answer.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I do want to also say congratulations on the new government. I do hope that they do what they promised. There's a lot of work that the 72 Liberal Democrat 72 Liberal Democrat MPs will be pushing the new government on. And considering that the Labour government won with just, I think, 34% of the national vote, we do need to make sure that the government does do as much as they promised the electorate, because the Liberal Democrats will be pushing to make sure that these changes do come across. Thank you.
Chair, I'm relieved with that comment. I thought the member was going to advise that I used Ed Davies' campaigning tactics in my next election. That's a no.
Well, seemed to work, didn't it? Assembly Member Bakari, would you like your question lower down the order paper withdrawn? You seem to have covered the subject. You don't want, can I withdraw that one? Thank you very much. The next question comes from Assembly Member Hall, and it concerns the congestion charge exemption for electric vehicles.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your question. London is leading the way when it comes to electric vehicles. New figures shows that we now have over 20,000 public electric vehicle charging points across London, accounting for around 1/3 of all charging points in the UK. Over 1,200 of these are rapid chargers, and over 58% of taxis in London allow electric. From its introduction more than 20 years ago, the objective of the congestion charge has always been to reduce congestion in London. We know that a less congested city leads to better journey times and improved air quality. The congestion charge reduced traffic entering the zone by 18% during weekday charging hours and boosted bus travel in central London by 33%. Congestion charge discounts for cleaner vehicles have always been subject to tightening standards. In 2010, Boris Johnson ended the alternative fuel discount because developments in the low-emission vehicle market meant it was no longer effective, introducing a greener vehicle discount, which itself was later reviewed and amended. When the current cleaner vehicle discount was announced in 2018, it was made clear that it would expire in December 2025, given a 7.5-year notice period, by which point it was expected that electric vehicles would have grown in number to such an extent that continuing to exempt them would undermine the objectives of the congestion charge. The proposal was subject to public consultation, with further phases, including the expiry of the discount, clearly signposted to support individuals and businesses to plan ahead. My understanding is that no one from the Conservative group objected to the tapering of the cleaner vehicle discount. The cleaner vehicle discount was a phased scheme to manage traffic and congestion in London and to regulate the number of vehicles eligible for the discount so as to protect the overall objective of the congestion charge scheme to reduce congestion. When it was introduced, there were just over 20,000 vehicles registered at the cleaner vehicle discount. At the end of June 2024, that figure was more than 112,000 vehicles. With another 18 months until the discount expires, this number will continue to grow. Exemptions for emergency service vehicles, disabled people and black cabs that are licensed with London Taxi and private hire will remain in place. There are still 18 months until the cleaner vehicle discount ends, so it's difficult to forecast precisely how this will impact the revenue TfL will receive from the congestion charge. Any and all net income is reinvested into maintaining and improving the transport network.
Well, thank you for that exceptionally long answer to a very short and simple question. And the question for anybody that doesn't know is, how much additional money does TfL expect to raise in 2026 due to you scrapping this? So what's the ballpark figure that TfL are looking at?
We simply don't know. There's still 18 months to go, so we're not clear the trajectory of cleaner vehicles in relation to those that will be caught by this, so we can't make an assessment. What I can say is it's not in the business plan. Had there been an assessment, it would have been in the business plan. So, for example, the member will be aware that when it comes to ULEZ, that's in the business plan, but this isn't.
Well, I'm astounded by that, but we'll wait and see how much money that you intend to make of that, because obviously your war on the motorists, they will continue to pay. Oliver Lord from the campaign group Clean Cities called the scrapping of the exemption puzzling and added, and I'm quoting, by offering incentives to businesses for electric vehicles, we not only promote greener transport, but we also draw a line against the most polluting freight vehicles. Is he wrong?
Well, actually, somebody who's worked extensively with Ollie Lord and whose views have been opposed by the Conservative group for decades. The point I'd make to Ollie Lord is the purpose of the congestion charge is to reduce congestion. If you think of the logic of giving exemptions to electric vehicles, it would mean at some stage in the future, every single vehicle, if it was to be electric, would not pay a charge, which doesn't reduce congestion. The idea is to reduce congestion and to encourage people to use other forms of transport, but the reason why this scheme was introduced was to nudge people's behaviour with an incentive, if they have to drive a car, for it to be electric.
Well, I've always thought that cleaner air was your main mantra, but let's try Alex Pearce. He's from the electric car support company Going Green, and he said, and I'll quote him, environmentally and economically, this makes no sense. So is he wrong?
I think Zach Plansky fell off his chair when he heard Susan Hall quoting "Going Green."
I hope he's impressed. But can you just answer?
Can we just get this? Can we get this straight?
No. Can you just answer? You're on my time.
The Conservative member has quoted Ollie Lord and "Going Green" in the space of 3 minutes.
Please answer the question,
I've been quite
Mr.
clear.
Mayor.
The purpose of the congestion charge is to reduce congestion. Even Boris Johnson didn't think that it was right to give an indefinite exemption to vehicles. And what I'm doing is making it quite clear. We've telegraphed almost 8 years in advance of the exemption coming to an end. There will be further exemptions for the groups that I've set out in my answer, those who are disabled, those that are black taxis, those that are emergency service vehicles, and so forth. But this tapering, that's what tapering does, will come to an end at the end of 2025.
I think it just shows that it's not about clean air, it's about making money, and I'm surprised that you don't know how much money. And actually, if you wanted to stop congestion, you'd look at some of the schemes that have been put into London that do nothing but cause congestion, like the massive great big bike line on Park Lane, and there are very many other areas that you could move or change in order to stop congestion. But of course, as usual, it's a way of you taxing drivers in London. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, was that a question for you to respond to?
I think
It's a statement.
I think I think it was a finishing flourish, actually. Assembly Member, the next question is in the name of Assembly Member Georgiou, and it's England flags on black cabs and PHVs.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. I, like so many others, I'm incredibly proud of the England men's team's performance during the Euros. Gareth Southgate led the team to a record first final in a major tournament on foreign soil. And although it was a disappointment of the night, we're all so proud of what they've achieved. TfL is responsible for regulating taxi and private hire vehicle services in London, and for reasons I would hope would be obvious, I don't directly get involved in their role as the regulator. TfL's primary priority in this regard is to ensure passenger safety. One of the requirements this leads to is TfL only allowing official signage to be displayed in taxis and private hire vehicles. TfL must consider the safety of all road users, and this policy helps avoid items detaching and obstructing the roadway or becoming a distraction to road users or impeding the driver. This has been the case since private hire vehicles were first regulated in London in 2004, and for black cabs the requirement goes back until at least 1934. I should stress this isn't a policy specific to the St George's flag or the Euros. This is a long-standing policy from well before I became mayor, covering badges and emblems of any type, and has been in place for decades. In fact, this was set out in the original regulations that were created when PHV services were first licensed in the early 2000s. And I know this policy is in place in many other licensing areas across the country, including Birmingham, Bristol, Glasgow, Lancaster, Middlesbrough, Redcar and Cleveland, Rochdale, St Albans, Swale, Trafford and Wolverhampton, to name a few. I, of course, understand some taxi and private hire drivers will want to show their support for whatever their passion is, whether that be the national or local sporting teams or any of their causes close to their hearts. I'm told no taxi or PHV driver has been asked to remove a St George's cross from their vehicle during the tournament. More broadly, I'll continue to support the taxi and private hire industry, which plays an important role in the life of our city. Since I became mayor, I've supported the industry, for example, through financial support to delicense diesel taxis, to invest in new zero-emission capable vehicles, allow access to most bus lanes in London for licensed taxi drivers, increasing cab ranks, and much more, and I'll continue to do so.
Thank you very much for your response, Mr. Mayor. My grandparents came here in the 60s, and their children and their grandchildren were always told there are only two flags you should be loyal to, the Union flag and St George's flag, to the point my grandmother's so patriotic that we're not allowed to drink tea in our house unless it's out of one of the Jubilee teapots. Therefore, you can understand, I hope, the frustration of black cab drivers and private hire vehicles, that at a time when many councils seem to fly every flag other than St George's flag or the Union flag, there is a frustration there. So, given that, and I appreciate what you've said in your response, and I understand it comes from official TfL guidance, do you believe that taxi drivers flying the England or Union flag would be more distracted having those than adverts painted on cars and lorries? Because as you must know, there are plenty of things that are distractions on the road apart from flags. So do you understand where I'm going with that equivalence?
No. So the regulations aren't about adverts on the taxi. They're about them becoming detached, as I understand from the regulations. As you'll appreciate, I've only just become an expert over the last few days. So the regulations, I think, aren't just, they're firstly impeding the driver in relation to where the flag is, I suspect, them becoming detached and so forth. And so, of course, I understand people want to support the team. I mean, all of us, who were at the O2 on Sunday night, we saw the support and warmth for the team. We've seen across the last few weeks the flags flying across our city and across our country, in people's homes, and so forth. I think the regulations, from my understanding, is to do with something different, but I'm more than happy for the member to go and speak to TfL and others at DFT in relation to those regulations. It's not a London-only issue. It's an issue that takes place across the country, but of course I understand the frustrations.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you appreciate my comments. We're not saying that this was a scheme that you implemented or support. It's based on TfL guidance. But I do hope, and if it's okay with you, that you do write to TfL to provide me with a more comprehensive response as to why, I appreciate your answer, but a comprehensive response why this policy is in place, and actually whether the exact scheme is in place in other local authorities, because to my understanding there are differences between London
and those other local authorities. So if I could get a response on that basis, I'd appreciate it.
Chair, firstly, can I thank the member for asking the question the way he asked the question? Of course, I understand the issue and I empathise with the issue. I'm more than happy to share with TfL what the member has said and ask them to write to him, responding to the points he's raised, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your comments on that question. And I think all of us here share our strong support for the national team and their performance in the Euros. It was a fantastic experience for the whole country to get behind. But there are questions and certain perceptions of double standards I think need to be discussed. And I used a minicab to get to the pub that I watched the final in, and it was proudly displaying a Palestinian flag. Now, I wasn't mad keen on that, but I didn't have a complaint because I believe in freedom of expression. I think supporting Palestine is not a view that I share, but it is a view that has a right to be expressed. And I think showing support for our national team is also one that should absolutely be able to be expressed. But we see on an almost weekly basis in our city, the Met almost sort of bends over backwards to facilitate large-scale gatherings, and on quite a lot of occasions these very much push the boundaries between peaceful protest and something much more similar. And yet when we came to the football final Sunday, which, although notwithstanding the final result, it could have been a fantastic opportunity for a huge national celebration, and yet no outdoor screens, no congregation allowed, dispersal order in place. So, notwithstanding that final result, and we didn't get the result we wanted, it felt that we were not welcome in our cities. So, what is the point of Sir Keir Starmer dumping Emily Thornberry from Labour's front bench if, when it comes to here in London, we channel her spirit through these institutions instead?
Chair, I'm more than happy to answer the question, but I don't want a precedent to be set where the question's on a topic about flags and black cabs, and I'm asked to answer a question on other issues. So I'm more than happy to answer the question, but what I don't want is an impression to be given that it's game for any question at all when it comes to...
It isn't. There was a reference in the member's question to England flags and the use of flags. And, well,
okay, fine, I'll answer the question.
You've all tried it. Don't ever go now, just because somebody else does.
Can I say, firstly, I'm really pleased that the Reform member is quoting the Human Rights Act, freedom of expression, and the European Convention of Human Rights. The European Convention of Human Rights does talk about freedom of expression, and I fully support the European Convention of Human Rights, and I'm hoping he will confirm so does he support the European Convention of Human Rights. Article 10, I think, of the ECHR. And I agree, people should be free to fly the flag. I went to the O2 on Sunday evening. We were giving out free St George's flags to people who came to the O2. And we organised a free screening of the England game at the O2 to allow people a chance to watch the game together. All the other places we usually use for screenings were booked up for other events. And you'll appreciate, as somebody who claims to support the England team, it's real risky booking a venue for a final with England, the men's team anyway, because we never get to the final when the tournament's held overseas. The first time ever. And I'm somebody who I can share now, in 2018, did book a venue for the final. And we got beaten by Croatia. And I watched that game at Hyde Park. And in 2021, it was COVID. And so we couldn't organise a screening then. So I can assure him, in relation to watching the England team, I support them. And I support this manager, by the way, who stepped down, even when he encourages players to take the knee. That's the support I have for the English football team. Can you say the same?
I should remind you, this is... you don't have to answer any questions.
Questions to the Mayor, not questions to me. But in 2 years' time, I look forward to and the opportunity to celebrate that in public should we win.
Thank you. The next question concerns new Parliament planning priorities, and that's in the name of Assembly Member Moema.
Thanks for your question. I welcome the energy and sense of purpose this new government has towards growth, including planning. Like the Chancellor and Secretary of State for Housing, Community and Local Government, I'm committed to building the homes Londoners need. We had a good meeting with the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister at Downing Street last week, and the commitment to a Council of Regions and Nations in the first few days says a lot about the government and the tone for the collaborative working that will be so critical for delivery. London has a pipeline of around 300,000 homes with planning permission that are not being built out because of policy uncertainty, challenging economic conditions and the need for investment in infrastructure and the affordable housing programme. Working together with local councils, we're taking the steps needed to get these built, and this will be a key focus of work across all levels of government. We also need to think about delivery models for affordable housing and revenue-raising mechanisms such as land value capture to support infrastructure investment. I welcome the government's acknowledgement of capacity issues with planning services, a significant barrier that we've long highlighted. My offices will be working with the government to put forward proposals for London. This new government provides the opportunity for positive change with less time and pressure resources diverted on poorly thought through ideas like the infrastructure levy. There are some key things this new government could do right away to improve things, such as removing the direction to review isolated parts of the London Plan, scrapping the infrastructure levy, and working with us to implement the recommendations of the Housing Delivery Task Force. I also look forward to working with the newly appointed Ministers on Energy, Transport and Business, all of which are critically important to London's planning policies and priorities. I'm looking forward to a positive working relationship with this government as a key partner.
Thank you, Mayor Khan. And so just yesterday, I was with around 100 people who have interests in what next for planning and new homes here in London, in the capital, and that was facilitated by CPRE. So it was really, really welcome, mature discussion about what the government can do next. But I just wanted to ask you, you've mentioned the additional capacity that the new government have pledged, for example, around the 300 new planning officers to support the progress of applications and permissions. But just in addition to that, what impact do you think the government's changes will have to the upcoming review of the London Plan? It's definitely something that we will be looking at the committee.
Well, thanks for the question. You'll be aware that the brilliant work Jules Pipe began in Term 1 in relation to public practice has led to more people being, seconded to town halls. Borough planning and public realm teams really, really important. So in relation to the issue raised, what we're keen to do is to work with the government in relation to these issues in relation to planning, more office involved in planning, and we'll be working with the government in relation to these issues. A whole list of things we can work with the government in relation to some of the ideas you've suggested that CPRE convened, but other issues as well. And one of the key things we've got to do in relation to the London Plan is to wait for the government's national policy guidance, because the London Plan is going to be consistent with national policy. You'll be aware, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has already announced a new MPPF in relation to housing targets, growth and so forth. We'll be responding to the consultation on that and make sure our London Plan coincides with that.
Great, thank you. And so obviously here at City Hall we have the planning team. They do amazing work to set the strategic direction for our capital. And there's an opportunity here for two-way exchange. So I know you have mentioned that you'll be meeting ministers, and is there an opportunity for the new government to learn from the practices here at City Hall in terms of setting that strategic direction? Just wonder if there's anything that you would like for them to look at and learn from us that might be regulated nationally.
Yes, so my team were in touch this morning with the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, CLG, and actually I'll pass on your suggestion about actually a two-way process in relation to some of the expertise we have here. I mentioned public practice, but some of the other great things we do, we think the government can scale up nationally. I'll give you an example. Our urban greening factor in relation to our policies is really important. The pre-application consultation work we do with applicants is really important. I met with the Secretary of State for Environment a few days ago and mentioned our London Plan in relation to the circular economy statement required from developers. And there'll be other examples like that where, because there's no dogma and party politics. They'll want to learn about some of the stuff we're doing in a non-patronising way that, that they can use in the centre. Then when it comes to working with regional mayors and councils, some of that best practice can be spread across the country.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns future housing provision, and it's in the name of Assembly Member McCartney.
Thank you for your question. First and foremost, we now have a government that backs our capital city, rather than wanting to talk it down, that wants to work with London to fix the housing crisis and turbocharge the capital's economic growth. The last government left a sorry inheritance of underinvestment, policy delay and indifference towards housing growth. It gave the sector no certainty, refusing to make decisions on a long-term rent settlement and backtracking on long-standing energy-efficient targets. It removed mandatory housing targets, failed to provide adequate funding for new social and affordable housing, and undermined the ability of councils and housing associations to maintain their homes. It slowed down crucial planning decisions on housing and the transport needed to unlock homes, and blocked much of the high-rise housing pipeline by failing to provide guidance on second staircases for months. We know that recovering from this dire legacy won't happen straight away, but the new government is already taking the action needed, such as restoring mandatory housing targets and reviewing the national planning policy framework. This new government is focused on growth. It will build 1.5 million homes this Parliament and deliver the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. Building these homes will help the UK economy grow. London has an excellent delivery record, hitting our affordable housing targets when the previous government failed in other parts of the country, and will play a big part in supporting the government, and we want their support in building 40,000 new council homes over the course of the next decade. These new homes will make a real and positive change to the lives of London. And I think the meetings over the last few days have shown the commitment of the Prime Minister down for the government to work with us, not just in City Hall, but councils in London and across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, I was fortunate enough to attend the opening of a social rented housing block in Haringey, one of the 3,000 socially rented homes that you're providing funding for over the next few years. And it's those homes that actually make life-changing impacts on many of our local residents. Your manifesto talked about the work you have done, which is very welcome, on building more social homes in the capital. And you mentioned that in your response just now. But exactly how are you going to be working with the government to deliver those socially rented homes?
Well, look, one of the concerns I had in relation to the previous government's infrastructure levy is it takes away the ability of a council to negotiate planning gain through affordable homes. And so we want the government to get rid of the infrastructure levy proposals. We want the government to ensure that those planning officers go to councils in London who've been hollowed out because of austerity over the last 14 years. That expertise will help councils in relation to things they can do with developers. We also need more powers in relation to land assembly. That will really help. You may have a small pocket of land here owned by private owner, pocket of land owned by the council, pocket of land owned by TfL or Network Rail. That land assembly can be a nightmare. It can take ages. That will help. Housing targets will help because councils will know if they don't give permission, they'll lose the power over a period of time to grant permission. They'll be taken away from them, so they'll be incentivised to give permission. Really, really important. But when I speak to investors, whether it's in housing or other areas, what they want from the government is some calm stability and certainty for us to be a safe place to invest. And, I think that calm certainty and stability has, over the last 13 days, been shown. And that will lead to the private sector investing in housing in London. You will be aware a London plan requires a certain percentage to be genuinely affordable. We'll also need a decent affordable homes programme from the government to ensure we can subsidise some of those homes being built. And the final thing that I should add, because I'd be crucified by council leaders if I didn't, is the government needs to change the rules around right to buy receipts and sharing those with grant allocation and so forth. The rules don't make sense.
Thank you. And myself and other Labour members have regularly asked you about temporary accommodation. And obviously, the more socially rented and other affordable homes we can build, the less pressure there will be on council waiting lists. But we know that one of the risk factors to local council finances at the moment is the burgeoning and massive bills for for temporary accommodation. So can I just check that you are actually hand in glove with London councils on this, and the lobbying aspects you will be doing will be made in concert with them as well?
Well, firstly, I should put on record my congratulations to the former chair of London Council. It's not just being elected as a member of Parliament, but being accelerated as a minister. It took her 4 days. It took me 3 years when I was a baby MP. But you're right in relation to the support we need to give councils. Look, temporary accommodation is an oxymoron. It's never temporary.
Yeah.
These accommodation last 10, 14, 15 years. The more genuine affordable homes we can build, less chance of people being stuck in TA for years and years and years. And by the way, the three things that are leading to councils being bankrupt is the cost of temporary accommodation, children's services and social care.
Yeah.
The government's got to sort those three things out.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Baker, and it concerns the new government and transport in London.
Thank you for your question. The new government's already signalled its intent to work collaboratively with mayors to drive growth across the country. I'll be working hand in hand with them to do this and to deliver the sustainable, affordable, reliable and safe transport service Londoners need. When I outlined plans for the London Growth Plan in April alongside the now Chancellor Rachel Reeves, I set a target of helping to create 150,000 high-quality, well-paid jobs in sectors including manufacturing and logistics, and the delivery of this is closely entwined with efficient and modern transport infrastructure. London already contributes £43.6 million net to the national economy every year, so we play a key role in boosting national productivity and delivering on the national growth mission. And the member will be aware the opening of the Elizabeth line, the extension of the Northern line to Battersea, and the regeneration driven by London Overground has proven that major projects unlocked thousands of new homes and jobs, not just in London, but across the country. A report from the National Infrastructure Commission described the last funding deal the previous government gave to TfL as and I quote, a sticking plaster. Without long-term certainty, maintaining and renewing infrastructure effectively and efficiently has been extremely challenging. While TfL always operates safely, this has led to high costs and increasing impacts on reliability and performance. Parts of TfL network are under strain and require investment now. Services, including the Central Line and trams, have suffered serious investment-related disruption, and many of London's strategic roads, notably the flyover at Brent Cross, need significant investment to keep them safe and reliable. I've already had some meetings with the Prime Minister and new Transport Secretary. I'm looking forward to working closely with them to address these issues going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I think I probably share your optimism that we'll be able to solve many of those problems together with the new government. I'd like to follow up on a couple of issues, one of which has already been covered, but so I'd like to return to the subject of public ownership of rail and devolution. Now, I do appreciate that the details of how these new structures need to be discussed and worked through, and we're really working on very top-line announcements from the government just 13 days in. But I think it's worth stating that the Assembly as a whole, generally, has always been supported of the devolution to rail to the Mayor and to Transport for London, especially as it would give those Londoners who rely on rail the same level of control and accountability as those who rely on TfL services. So I wonder if you'd be able to outline what you think the benefits might be if those discussions, in those discussions, and what might come through from that.
Yeah, can I thank you for the way you asked the question. Look, the reason why I want TfL to run these train services that are currently run by private companies is not for the sake of its increased TfL's empire. It's because we think if TfL run these services, it will lead to fewer cancellations, fewer delays, more reliability, less strikes, and they benefit from our fares freeze as well, by the way. And so we do want to take over these commuter trains. We could also metroise the service so it's more frequent and so forth. And so I have started raising this with the government. The challenges are, of course, is you've got to wait until the franchise ends. You don't want to use taxpayers' money to pay shareholders and dividends. But also we would need support financially to take these over. We don't just want to take over a new line when, for example, there's been years of neglect in capital investment. And so those are the sorts of conversations we'd need to have. So I've asked TfL to draw up a list of when the next contracts come up for renewal, and that will help us to say to the government, look, this one's coming up for renewal in year blah. Let's have a conversation about us taking it over rather than giving out to another private company, or indeed, Great British Rail.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I've got that list somewhere as well, as you can imagine. A countdown to all of them. In a similar vein, the new government have previously said they're committed to lifting the ban on municipal ownership of buses. Now, there's lots and lots of discussion about the structure and ownership of buses outside London, but not a huge amount. It's not a lot. Arguments haven't been rehearsed a huge amount within London. And you'd previously said that you'd like to explore the potential benefits of bringing a bus operator into public ownership. I'm wondering if you'd be able to expand on that and what you feel potentially the benefits may be.
Yeah, well, notwithstanding the changes made by a previous government in relation to bus deregulation, London did have a bus company. Boris Johnson sold it off when he was mayor. To create a new publicly owned bus company, we needed to change in legislation. So, in fact, one of the issues I raised with the Transport Secretary this morning was that very issue. And so we're going to be speaking to the government about the possibility of doing so. And it's not taking over the service for the sake of taking them over. It's if a private company is making profit, wouldn't it be nice if it was run by us, we made the profit and reinvested it in public transport rather than in our shareholders getting dividends. But secondly, it provides a good benchmark when it comes to bids coming in and so forth. So, there's lots of upsides in us having a publicly owned bus company. And I'll do what I can to persuade the government. And one of the bills announced in the King's speech was in relation to a bus bill. So that provides us with a vehicle, forgive the pun, to put in a clause to address this issue. But I'm keen to do so.
Let's hope we get the chance. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, you very recently launched a consultation on the proposed charges for the Silvertown and Blackwall tunnels, which some of us think will be another burden on working Londoners going about their daily business. Now, I think it's fair to say there was a degree of dissatisfaction with the manner in which the consultation on the ULEZ extension was handled. Given that, how can we be confident in the veracity of this new consultation? And if it delivers a result that you aren't necessarily looking for, will you still press ahead with those proposed charges?
Well, firstly, I've not announced anything new. I think Boris Johnson announced this in 2012. I think there's been at least 6 different consultations on the Silvertown tunnel. The consultation is in relation to a number of things to do with discounts, exemptions and so forth in relation to the Silvertown and Blackwall tunnel. It is a consultation. It is not a referendum. What we'll do is respond to the points made in the consultation by addressing them via the various exemptions and schemes and so forth that have been announced by TfL. We want to be supporting local residents, supporting local businesses, supporting those who want to cycle and so forth. And the consultation responses are really helpful in us making sure we get the best scheme possible.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any other things that Londoners have been using happily free of charge for over 100 years that you want to tax?
So the Silvertown Tunnel has not been built, so I'd be astonished if there are people using that for hundreds of years. But if he's got examples of people using that, swimming across that part of the river, let me know, because there's still time for them to enter the Olympics, which start on Saturday. I'm quite clear in relation to this being a good example of just because the previous mayor is Tory, it doesn't mean all their ideas are bad. And Boris Johnson actually had a good idea to address the problems caused in that part of London. And he recognised that the Blackwall Tunnel is not fit for purpose. It is a Victorian tunnel. It on average closes 700 times a year. I this morning spoke to a bus driver who drives the 108 bus. I'm told one of the most unreliable buses in the city. Why? Because every time there's a closure of the Blackwall Tunnel and you're on that bus, you get stuck on that bus waiting it for ages. So to give Boris Johnson credit, and it's unlike me, Boris Johnson... somebody's having a heart attack over there.
I'm afraid, Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid Assembly Member Wilson is now out of time.
Chair, can it be noted I was about to praise him even more and you stopped me. That's fine.
You praised him more than I ever did. Anyway. If we can, I'm going to intervene on this one, so if we can go on the clock for this one. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the transport question that was asked today because it gives me an opportunity to raise to you the issue of the temporary closure of Colindale Station. This has residents around Colindale Station raised their concerns prior to the closure that the temporary arrangements, the replacement buses and the supposed increased capacity of existing bus routes would in some way make it easier for residents. A survey has recently been done by the Colindale Station Concern Group that completed on the 14th of July. So it's a very current survey of residents in the area, and it lists a whole range of extreme concerns, both about the overcrowding of the buses, their infrequency, there are safety concerns, and yet all this was raised beforehand. Would you undertake to get to ensure that your Deputy Mayor Seb Dance meets with the Colindale Station Concern Group for them to be able to highlight their very real, tangible and measurable concerns about these temporary arrangements?
Chair, can I thank you for raising these issues, which are clearly important to the people you're talking about. It's not in my brief, but I know the Deputy Mayor is speaking on a regular basis with Anne Clark and with the MPs. I'm more than happy to undertake to do as he's asked me to do. So can I take that away and get back to him? And I'll let him know when the meeting is as well, in case he wants to go as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that commitment that you've made. Now, back on the clock, if off the clock, or on the clock, depending on which point of view you have. We now move on to Assembly Member Prince, and the subject is unpaid ULEZ fines.
Thank you for your question. On the 29th of August 2023, the ULEZ was expanded to cover all London boroughs, meaning an additional 5 million Londoners can breathe cleaner air. The policy is having its intended effect. Over 95% of vehicles seen driving in the ULEZ zone are now compliant. Drivers of non-compliant vehicles must pay a daily fee to drive in the zone, otherwise they may receive a penalty charge and notice. Compliance is demonstrably very high. The latest published fact sheet shows that on an average day, only 0.4% of vehicles received a PCN, penalty charge notice. The very large majority of people driving in London do so in cars that comply or pay the required fee. On receipt of a PCN, the registered keeper of the vehicle has 28 days to pay it or to make a representation challenging the penalty. The penalty is put on hold if a representation is received, while a decision is taken on whether to accept or reject it. If the representation is accepted, the PCN is cancelled. If the representation is rejected, there is a further opportunity to pay the PCN or to make an appeal to the independent adjudicator at London tribunals. It's not unusual for payment of a PCN issued for any reason to be received many weeks after it's been issued. If a PCN is challenged, this process can take several months to resolve, meaning it can be some time before an accurate figure of PCNs paid can be recorded. More of these PCNs will be paid over time as the appeals procedure concludes and payments are made. TfL is following the usual processes to recover any unpaid fines. Any and all net income from this process is reinvested into maintaining and improving the transport network. This is money that we put to good use for the benefit of all Londoners. I encourage all PCN recipients to engage with TfL, particularly if they're struggling with any difficulties or hardship. The easiest way to pay the ULEZ charge for the small number of non-compliant vehicles is to sign up to TfL's auto pay system. I removed the annual auto pay registration fee in January 2023 to make it simpler for people with non-compliant vehicles to pay the charge. The ULEZ will lead to cleaner air for all Londoners while generating ever smaller net revenues, as has been the case with the previous expansion to inner London.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. According to an Evening Standard article, at the moment there's in excess of £2 million outstanding in these fines. Do you think that there's something wrong with the process, or why do you think it is that such a large amount of money is outstanding?
A variety of reasons. I mean, as I said in my main answer, I mean, people are entitled to make representations. If they're not happy, they're entitled to appeal. And when they make a representation, the clock stops in relation to the amount they pay. So as you know, within 14 days you pay half, within 28 days you pay the full amount, and then it goes on. And so I would expect the amount of fines outstanding to go down as these appeals go through the system.
Did your researchers do any comparison with other PCNs? Because it does see at the moment it's looking like 2/3 of ULEZ fines aren't being paid. I'm sure that's not the case normally with other PCNs, say for instance if you park on a red route or park in a red bay by mistake.
I've not seen any of that sort of analysis of other stuff, but we can throw stats at each other. But we're talking about a very, very small number of vehicles are non-compliant and are paying the PCN. Most vehicles, as you know, 95% are compliant. They don't pay anything. Those that aren't compliant, most of them will pay the charge there is. A small number won't pay the charge and will receive a PCN. And we're looking into what the issue is in relation to those that haven't. And as I said to you, when the appeal system goes through, a lot of these will be paid. But I've not looked at an analysis versus other PCNs, no.
Do you think that'll be worthwhile?
Well, I think TfL know the reasons why there's this issue. This is a snapshot. But if TfL think it's worth doing so, I'm sure they would. But they may conclude that it's apples and pears.
I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Assembly Member Best, please.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, recently we've had issues with cameras being tilted onto non-ULEZ roads and residents ticketed and their objections rejected by TfL. I think this would be one of the easiest cases of an appeal to get right. Please, can you have a review, because it's caused a lot of distress to a lot of people.
I'm more than happy to share. I wasn't aware of that. Can after the meeting just ping me an email in relation
Can
to
I send you the specific details of that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question concerns affordable and green energy, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. We saw a lost decade of inaction from the previous government to help Londoners seal their leaky homes. This left them exposed to the high cost of fossil fuels, and I'm delighted that Ed Miliband is going to correct the course as the new Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. Retrofitting London's properties is the only sustainable, long-term way to reduce fuel poverty and keep people healthy and safe in their homes. However, after years of bad decisions by the previous government, energy bills for UK households were £22 billion higher over the past decade than would have been if the government hadn't cut their climate policies. So I'm pleased to see the new government's focus on Great British Energy, which will lower energy bills through clean, homegrown energy. The government's Warm Homes Plan will provide those in fuel poverty as well as low-income Londoners with grants and low-interest loans to retrofit their homes with better insulation and other improvements through low-carbon technologies. I've provided support and advice for fuel-poor Londoners throughout my mayoralty. My Warmer Homes Advice Service has supported over 24,000 households, and my Energy Advice London service provides free and impartial advice to all Londoners. My Warmer Homes programme has supported thousands of low-income Londoners with up to £25,000 of support, making their homes warmer, greener and cheaper to run. And I'm working with councils and housing associations in London to forge a bold new approach to retrofitting buildings so that we can upgrade more homes and offices and reduce energy costs. I've already met with the new Prime Minister, a sure sign that a new era of committed governance is now underway. London stands to benefit hugely from this new approach. I'm hopeful that retrofit funding can be devolved to London, that minimum efficiency standards to support renters can be extended and enforced, and that decarbonised heating can be encouraged through shifting levies and enhanced funding support. Together, national and London government can take the long-needed action required to secure fairer, greener energy for Londoners.
Yes, it's fantastic to see Ed Miliband, after an interruption of 14 years, back in his old role as Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, as was, and now Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. But it's also great to see two London MPs in his team, Sarah Jones and Miata Fambula, who's one of the new ones. And obviously she was at the New Economics Foundation and has spearheaded a number of really interesting projects around energy security and home insulation upgrades. But I just wanted to ask you, with the announcement yesterday of Great British Energy, how do you, I mean, obviously you could argue, we might argue, you might argue, that Great British Energy is following in your footsteps with setting up of London Power. Do you think that setting up Great British Energy is going to re-energise London Power? Because obviously that launched just before the COVID pandemic hit and to a certain extent had to go onto ice after that.
Yeah, I thought I was the king of puns. You may have taken that title off me in relation to the queen of puns. Look, so GB Energy's been quite clear. They're going to invest in energy generation. They won't be acting as an energy supplier, and that's really important because it will reduce the costs in relation to energy being supplied to the suppliers. I heard the boss of Octopus Energy, who helped us with London Energy, welcoming this on Sunday on TV, which shows even the sensible energy companies understand the difference by investing in renewables. It will make in relation to energy security, the cost and so forth. So it is a game changer in relation to this. What we didn't do is make the mistake, as some were asking us to do, to create our own energy company. Rather than doing that, we're piggybacking off Octopus Energy, and so we've not made the mistakes of others across the country.
No, there was quite a fuss made that the London Power wasn't good enough. And in fact, I've also noticed there's a bit of hypocrisy has crept in for one of the new Green MPs who's been opposing pylons, bringing energy from offshore wind onshore. I just wanted to ask you also about the issue of insulation, because obviously the lot that we've just got rid of at national level cancelled a lot of insulation projects. So one of the other problems, apart from lack of renewable energy installations going ahead, has been that we've failed to insulate properties. In fact, we've built new ones that are not sufficiently insulated. And most of them are under SAP 69 or EPCC. What would you like to see done? And I think this was covered marginally in yesterday's Queen's speech to King's speech. I have to remember to say King's speech, not Queen's speech, to improve insulation, because I think this is such a major area for Londoners.
In answer to your main question, I mentioned a figure of the increase to households of £22 billion. That's because the Conservative and Lib Dem government in 2012 removed a number of policies to address the issues you referred to. They got rid of the planning guidance that would require new homes to be energy efficient.
Yeah.
They removed the levies given to renewables and so forth. And so the Conservatives and Lib Dems have got to own some of the problems with the cost of living crisis caused by fuel prices, because it's their policies that have led to increases of £22 billion over the last 10 years. And so it's great to see Ed Miliband back in that post, understanding this issue helps the cost of living crisis. It brings energy bills down, and this ambition to double the amount of onshore wind, triple the amount of solar energy, quadruple the amount of offshore wind is really important. I just wish the Greens would walk the walk when it comes to supporting renewables and offshore wind. The idea that Green MP, that shows the hypocrisy, you're spot on once you're in positions of power and influence, would object to a pilot going through his constituency, but then claim to be in favour of renewables, shows the hypocrisy. Next thing we'll discover, he owns a private jet.
Well, and on that flourish, I think it's time to end. Thank you very much, Chair.
I think that was a humorous at the end of your comment there, and not an accusation, Mr. Mayor. I quite like the pylons in Barking Riverside. I really like them. Anyway, we will move on to the next question on dentistry and health, in the name of Assembly Member Hirani.
Thanks for your question. Look, 14 years of mismanagement and lack of investment in the NHS has left it on its knees, and it's our children who've been suffering the impact of it the most. Far too many young Londoners are waiting for treatment or struggling to access the care they need, meaning they're ending up in hospital unnecessarily, with their conditions worsening every day they're made to wait. I'm delighted we now have a government that's serious about reforming and investing in our health service, building an NHS fit for the future and creating the healthiest generation of children ever. It will take time to rebuild our health and care service, but I'm confident the new government can make a big difference. Through their Child Health Action Plan, the government's committed to cut waiting lists, with 40,000 more planned care appointments, meaning children and young people can access the care they need when they need it. They've promised to transform NHS dentistry, ensuring young Londoners can access dental appointments when they need them, and they'll focus on prevention, helping to reduce the number of children suffering from tooth decay in the first place, including through introducing a supervised toothbrushing scheme for 3 to 5-year-olds, targeting the areas of highest need. Alongside this, they've pledged to introduce breakfast clubs across our primary schools, and I'm proud that, combined with our commitment to fund universal free school meals for the next 4 years, children in London State primary schools will be guaranteed a healthy breakfast and lunch every single day. This means that alongside the wider financial impact on families, our children will have access to nutritious food at least twice a day, helping to improve their attainment, attendance, diets and teeth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the Health Committee met just yesterday to have its first session on dentistry in London, and I hope that you'll be following the outcomes of the committee itself when it reports in due course. I'm quite interested in the way that the new government's mandate and manifesto interacts with yours, particularly in this area, and I know your public health team has been doing a lot around healthy early years. And supervised toothbrushing, which is one of the policies that you mentioned, does happen in a piecemeal way across London already, but what do you feel would be the impact of a national, and obviously London benefits from that scheme?
Yeah, look. So in London, we've got a healthy early years award scheme, which is voluntarily. Early years settings can apply for this. And to get a bronze award scheme, Joe McCartney's been responsible for all the hard work on this. You've got to have a supervised toothbrushing programme, a trip to visit your local dentist practice, or role-playing games to support children to learn about self-care. And this is a life skill, right? Many of us are lucky our parents teach us this, or older siblings. In some families, it doesn't happen. And so this prevention, is really important as a life skill, but it saves misery of tooth decay and pain down the road as well, and the economic cost as well. And actually, you know, what the government's talking about, I think, is a game changer in relation to that, you know, brushing your teeth twice a day, learning how to brush your teeth properly, understanding about the impact of sugar without it being brushed off on tooth decay and so forth, will hopefully lead to fewer people having to need a dentist, but we do need to massively ramp up NHS dentists across the country.
Okay, and you've already spoken about the government proposals, potential proposals on breakfast clubs, and that obviously is in addition to what we have in London on universal free school meals. In terms of children's health outcomes during your term, what do you hope to see?
I think the combination of, you know, free breakfast, a free school meal, investment in youth clubs is a game changer for our young people. You know, we've got areas of our city where there are deserts for fresh food and produce, deserts for youth clubs, deserts for dentists. And I think we can make a big difference intervening and helping these families in these communities. And by the way, it saves money down the road. Aside from the human misery and so forth, it's just a basic economy to invest in young people.
Thank you. The focus and the shift on public health and prevention is welcome, and it's something that you've been championing for years, especially with following some of the initiatives that actually come from national government, including what you've done on TfL junk food advertising. There is and has been delay on national changes that have been due to come, which are due to be taken forward by the new government. Do you have any further thoughts or any insights that you can give on the banning of unhealthy food advertising?
But it's not, just don't just banning foods that are high in fats, sugar, and salt. Look what this government's done. Even though the idea was from the previous government, this government is going to run with the idea of banning smoking for those children born after a certain age. Why? Because it's prevention. So it just goes back to the point I made in relation to the Silvertown Tunnel. Just because an idea is from the previous lot doesn't mean it's a bad idea. And that shows grown-up politics. And I think this prevention is really important in relation to public health. The NHS is broken. 14 years of underinvestment has meant it's broken. But it's not simply about investing in the NHS. That's very important. We've got to change the way we access the health service, but also try and avoid people who don't need to be using the health service using it. And one good way of doing that is early intervention and prevention.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Assembly Member Best, please.
Thank you. In yesterday's session, we heard again and again and again that the single biggest problems for dentistry is not to do with funding. In fact, in London, money had to go back to the Treasury last year because of the underspend. The single biggest issue is the 2006 contract changes under the previous Labour government. So I do hope that you will work with this new government to change those. I also wanted to raise as well that before the outgoing government, they produced in February 2024 the Dentistry Recovery Plan. Most of those components have been implemented, but there is the remaining programme Smile for Life for 1 to 3-year-olds to be implemented throughout family hubs in a more joined up way across the country. And so I would hope, Mr Mayor, if you would be willing to support that and make sure that this new government looks at a joined-up approach, because that early years start, especially when you can talk to the parents as well, is really important.
Yeah, I apologise, it's my fault, nobody else is. I'm not aware of the second point you made. Can I take that away and look into that? And if it's as the member suggests, I'm more than happy to raise that.
It's a commitment. I think it's about time for a break, so we'll break for, I've forgotten what we'd agreed on. Was it 10? 10 minutes. There we go. because we'll... Members will take their seats. The next question on the agenda is in the name of Assembly Member Turrell, and it concerns leadership and ambition on the environment.
Thank you for your question. To start with, I would just like to make it clear that the role of Deputy Mayor for Environment has not been suspended. The recruitment process is ongoing, and I look forward to announcing the new Deputy Mayor in due course. I'm sure Assembly members will agree that it's worth taking the time to ensure we get the best candidate for such an important role. Shirley Rodriguez was an exceptional Deputy Mayor for London. I want to take this opportunity to thank her for 8 years of hard work and achievement for our city. When I was first elected in 2016, I promised to be the greenest mayor London has ever had, and I knew that to achieve this I would need the support of a deputy mayor that was both passionate about that mission, but who also had the experience and skills to make it a reality. That's what I got with Shirley, and these are the skills and characteristics we're looking for in our next deputy mayor. Shirley's success is clear from the air we breathe. The ULEZ is in place, the world's largest clean air zone, and every Londoner is breathing clean air because of it. 95% of vehicles are now compliant, so we know it's working and it's saving lives. And we've achieved so much more besides water fountains, retrofitting homes, community energy. We've planted more than 500,000 trees by the end of my second term, so I'm deeply grateful for Shirley's work. And I'm looking forward to a third term where we can go even further. I can assure Londoners that our leadership and ambition is not and will not be lost. My manifesto pledges action on climate change and ensuring a fair transition to a net zero city. I've no doubt London will continue to be seen as a world leader when it comes to climate action and protecting our environment. I know my environment team and officers across the GLA are already working on programmes reflecting my manifesto commitments, including helping schools in London reach net zero, introducing a new Green Routes fund for community green spaces, and investing in walking and cycling infrastructure alongside our electric vehicle charging network. We'll also be cleaning our rivers as we've cleaned our air, and will ensure that new green jobs are created to support growing green industries in the capital.
Thank you for that answer, Mr Mayor. And just before I ask my supplementary, I'm sure you and the Assembly will want to join me in congratulating my predecessor, Peter Fortune, on his election as the Member of Parliament for Bromley and Biggin Hill. I'm sure you will have no envy for the ministers who will be asking the same forensic style of questioning too. I'm pleased to hear the Deputy Mayor has not been suspended and that the recruitment process is ongoing with that. Can I ask the Mayor when he knew the previous Deputy Mayor wished to depart the role?
Can I congratulate Peter on his election to Parliament? I wish him a long and fruitful 5 years in Parliament before he loses the next general election. It was closer than he thought it was going to be, wasn't it? Look, so I have conversations all the time with deputy mayors. They're private conversations. I'm not willing to share those conversations with others.
Thank you for that, Mr Mayor. What I'd like to know is the fact that the position has now been vacant for 2 months, which has led to some confusion about the future of the position, hence the line of questioning today. So I just would like to know about what arrangements were made to make sure that this post is covered while a new Deputy Mayor is put in place.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, I misunderstood your last question. So I was aware before the election that Shirley wouldn't be staying on in post, but you'll appreciate what we can't do is measure the curtains when you're fighting an election. And so what I wasn't willing to do was to have a situation where during a campaign I was distracted in relation to what could happen in term 3 without focusing on the campaign. The good news, though, is we've got fantastic officers, a fantastic team in the Mayor's office who are making sure no ball is being dropped in the interim whilst we recruit the best possible person to be the next Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy.
Nothing further from me, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Mayor, I just wanted to briefly make sure that this word suspended, which is being used, that we're all absolutely clear, not only that the post has not been suspended, and actually given that we'd barely been back in the building for 2.5 weeks when Rishi Sunak stood in the rain and declared an election, so I think to say you've been not doing much for 2 months is a bit of a kind of a strange thing for the Assembly member to say. But just to be absolutely clear that the post holder was also not suspended. I just think this use of the word suspended might be a bit misleading, and that's not the case, is it? She did 7.5 years of a lot of hard work with huge achievements for this building.
Absolutely, but I didn't read the question as suggesting that the individual was suspended, and in fact I was at Shirley's retirement party last week, and I spoke effusively about her in even more glowing terms than I did in answer to the Mayor's question. But no, there's no hint at all of either Shirley being suspended or the role being suspended.
Thanks very much for that clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to welcome Year 12 and 13 students from St Thomas the Apostle College, and who are part of the Elevated Minds programme. And actually the contribution they've made is I had to take a selfie with them, and that held up this assembly meeting. So thank you very much, and you're very welcome. The next question concerns the government protection of the environment and is in the name of Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you for your question. After 14 years of government neglect of the environment, we now finally have a government that will put the environment first, albeit one that's still only in its first 2 weeks of service. Even in this short time, we've already seen how seriously the new government is taking the protection of our environment, with the new Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Ed Miliband, scrapping the previous government's ban on onshore wind in his first 24 hours in the job. And last week, Ed also announced plans for a rooftop revolution that will see millions of homes fitted with solar panels, plus the approval of 3 new solar farms in the east of England that have been blocked by the previous government. I'll work hand in hand with this new government to achieve a greener, fairer and safer London for everyone. In May, I was re-elected with a mandate to deliver a greener, more nature-rich city, taking a leadership role on net zero. This new national government now has the same mandate. After years of dither and delay that have seen our nation fall behind as renewable leaders, seen our nature depleted, our air reach illegally toxic levels, and our rivers filled with sewage, our nation finally has a government that understands service and which will take on these vital environmental challenges. There are some clear areas of alignment between the priorities of the new government and my own manifesto commitments. I've committed to a plan for swimmable rivers within 10 years, and the government has committed to put failing water companies under special measures to clean up our water. I'll continue to the work we've started to maintain London's status as a global green finance capital, and the new government is committed to making the UK the green finance capital of the world, something that London will be at the centre of. We share objectives on improving climate resilience, meeting net zero targets, including retrofitting homes, and protecting and enhancing green spaces. London's already world-leading in its approaches to environmental protection. The expanded ULEZ is the largest clean air zone in the world, for example. With further devolved powers, we can maximise our protection of the environment and ensure all Londoners benefit from cleaner air, more green spaces and resilience to climate change impacts.
Thank you, and congratulations on the new government. I know our Green MPs will be working with that government constructively, but also exposing gaps where they think they're in their plans, similar to how we as a Green Group work with you. On that, with the previous Deputy Mayor for the Environment, Shirley Rodriguez, I just want to put on record my comments that she was excellent. She always engaged with the Environment Committee in a really constructive way. I didn't agree with her on everything, for the Silvertown Tunnel, for instance, but she always presented with transparency. Now, the new Prime Minister took 1 day to appoint a new Environment Minister, but we're now 77 days after your re-election. We still don't have a Deputy Mayor. I just heard you say they'll be appointed in due course. But you've also said we won't have an updated environment strategy until we've got a Deputy Mayor. This is an unacceptable delay at this point.
I mean, he does realise we had a general election on July the 4th, and he does realise we've been in pre-election period, and I'm happy, Chair, to share the rules of the pre-election period. But for this 42 days in this campaign, we would have had the Deputy Mayor in post, and he'll be announced in due course. The reason for the environment strategy not being published is not because of lack of a Deputy Mayor. It's for a variety of reasons, including the importance of liaison, consulting and working with key stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to that work continuing with a new Deputy Mayor.
Do you have any ideas when we will get an updated environment strategy then?
In due course.
I mean, I thought a climate emergency might have warranted it to be a bit quicker, but that's okay. Major bodies like the Environment Agency have been massively underfunded by 14 years of austerity and underinvestment. Do you think this will change now we have a new government?
Well, every day we hear about a new crisis being uncovered by the new government as a consequence of the inheritance of the last 14 years. It will take some time, A, to uncover and expose the mess that's been left behind, and B, to fix the mess that's been left behind. I'm encouraged by the fact that the new Chancellor has already set out her priority to get growth. Why is growth important? Not just because of growth's sake, but because growth leads to more jobs, more wealth, more prosperity, which means, frankly speaking, more tax receipts for the government, as well as the other benefits of growth, which means investment in public services, including the Environment Agency. I think the Environment Agency doesn't just need more resources, it needs more teeth in relation to lack of powers. More so because we're outside the European Union now, so we've not got the benefits of the regulation and the enforcement powers that the EU had as well.
Good to hear. Finally, the last term I did a piece of work looking at women, particularly workers around the world who are on the front line of facing the climate crisis, and we had a conversation about it. Now that we have a new government, how will you be talking to the new Prime Minister differently about making sure that workers, in particular in London, are defended or protected from the rising effects of the climate crisis?
Thanks for your question. And by the way, you also were very helpful in relation to the work Emma has done in relation to the climate resilience review. And one of your very good suggestions was making sure that she's speaking to the sort of people that represent the people you're talking about. And so I'm hoping that that publication of that report this week was really important, the same week as the King's speech. But also some of the things she highlighted about who faces the consequences of climate change, I think will land well with the government committed to addressing social injustice. My commitment to him is I'll work closely with him to make sure these issues aren't forgotten about, because often they are for reasons he's well aware of. And let's work together to address these issues.
Yeah,
and provide allyship.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, our previous exchange 2 MQTs ago, we discussed the Greenbelt, and I welcomed your response. However, I am concerned by comments coming from special advisors and particular members of Parliament in the new Labour government. I'm not going to debate the rights and wrongs of your recent decision on Hounslow building and the Greenbelt, but I'm just observing it. But I have always defended you when it comes to the Greenbelt, and I've always said, I may disagree with this mayor on a lot of things, but at least he's been consistent on the Greenbelt. So therefore, my question to you is, post-general election, given the things I've just referenced, has there been any change in your approach or your view to protecting London's Greenbelt?
No. I'm guided by the London Plan, which is guided by national policy, and the London Plan is quite clear in relation to the Greenbelt.
But given that there is a likelihood that there will be further changes to the NPPF, and the Deputy Prime Minister has alluded to that, and there's been some references within the King's speech and bills that are coming up in Parliament, my line of questioning is regarding, if things change with the government's approach, will you change yours?
Well, the London Plan has to be consistent with national policies, so we've got no choice in relation to what national policy is. But I just give him some hope in relation to the concerns he's got, and he's right, this is an issue about which we can agree on a cross-party basis. Often, once a policy has been announced and there's a draft and there's consultation, the policy you end up with in the NPPF may be different to what you've read in the media at this stage and so forth. It's always been my view, brownfield first. It's always been my view that not all Greenbelt is of natural beauty. I think Lord Bailey has been quite brave actually recently talking about the Greenbelt. That being said, I'm quite clear the London Plan stands, but we'll need to be consistent with national policy if and when it changes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The next question concerns the London economy and is in the name of Assembly Member Ahmed.
Thank you for your question. The election of a new government is an exciting opportunity for people and communities right across London. When I met with the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister last week alongside my fellow mayors, they set out their plans to put more power in the hands of local leaders so we can help deliver economic growth in all parts of the country. This is the beginning of what I hope will be a long and fruitful relationship with the new government. I'll be meeting with more government colleagues in the coming days and weeks and throughout my third term to make the case for London. London provides over £43 billion net to the Treasury each year, and our unique contribution can play a pivotal role in boosting national economic growth, creating good jobs, reducing inequality and helping to rebuild Britain. London's growth plan, with a target of helping to create more than 150,000 good jobs and increasing living standards, will be at the forefront of this work. It will be delivered in close collaboration with boroughs, businesses, trade unions, civil society stakeholders and the wider London system, working in tandem with the new government. Building on the work we've already done over our first 2 terms, we'll go further and faster in tackling the biggest issues facing our capital. These include fixing the housing crisis, delivering new infrastructure, providing good jobs, reducing poverty, and giving young Londoners the best possible chance of success in life. The previous government took the damaging and counterproductive approach of talking London down and starving us of investment. Having a government that wants to work with us, not against us, will truly be a game changer in delivering the inclusive growth and investment our communities deserve.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, as you know, the last Labour government developed a child poverty strategy and took 1 million children out of poverty. Sadly, the Conservative government cancelled that, and their legacy was to leave 1 in 3 children living in poverty. London faces particular challenges, and they have been exacerbated by the worst cost of living crisis in history. You've already plugged the gaps but left by the previous government with policies such as your groundbreaking initiative on universal free school meals. Mr Mayor, do you welcome yesterday's government announcement to deliver again a child poverty strategy, and how will you work with this new government to deliver for London's children?
Yeah, the announcement yesterday and the work of the task force is important in relation to understanding these issues, not just the consequences, but the causes, and addressing both those issues is really important. You'll be aware one of the announcements, one of the things I've set out in my manifesto was this idea of a multi-bank to support new mums leaving the maternity ward in things like nappies, baby issues and so forth. That's an example of us having to plug the gap. There's a question to be asked in advance of that, in what causes the poverty that leads to us having to provide things like a multi-bank. And so I really welcome the announcement yesterday. I'm looking forward to its work beginning as soon as possible, and we'll certainly be contributing to the work they do.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Also, we've talked about devolution, and you obviously went to the meeting this week, and it was great to see you there. How far are you speaking with the government about devolution for London?
So one of the points I've sort of got to get across to the new government in the last 13 days, in a respectful way, is London's comparator isn't Greater Manchester or Liverpool or the west of Yorkshire. I say this in a respectful way. It's New York, Singapore, Hong Kong. We are the capital city. And I want all parts of the country to get more powers and resources. Really important, more powers devolved down to them, skills, housing, and so forth. And the good news is the government understands London is different. And by the way, we need the rest of the country to do well, and I'd hope the rest of the country wants us to do well as well. And I know they do from the conversations I have with people across the country.
Thank you. And obviously, as you know, 23% of this country's GDP is generated in this capital city. So when London does well, the rest of the country does well. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Best, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Mayor, some of the people that don't feel as though they are sharing equally in the success of London's economy are those working in the nighttime economy. And I want to focus particularly on the nightlife element of London's economy. Now, we know, obviously, since COVID, I think the higher you are, the harder you fall. And unfortunately, that has been the case in London. So while we see cities like Liverpool generating 43% growth, we are struggling to get back to where we once were in London and maintain that reputation that we have, not only as a leader in the country, Europe, but globally. And it now feels almost as though we are fighting to keep the crown nationally as opposed to internationally. I wanted to ask you specifically, what are your plans over this next term to generate life into nightlife in London?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't accept the premise of your question about London not being, a city that's got a huge amount to offer in relation to nightlife. There are challenges post-pandemic for all global cities. I speak regularly to colleagues in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, Berlin, Tokyo, Montreal, Toronto, Sydney, all facing big challenges. The good news is we're ahead of that crowd in relation to the bounce back, in relation to the nighttime economy and general return to the centre of our city. I think one of the things we've got to do is understand, though, that people's lifestyle habits have changed, whereas in the past, when I was younger, you'd come into the centre of London for a good time at night time. Now people want to have a good time in their own communities, wherever that may be in London. So we've got to have conversations with councils about the nighttime economy. You will know that sometimes residents don't appreciate, busy streets in their neighbourhoods. So those are conversations and tensions they've got to be addressed. But I'm really hopeful. The summer we've had so far in this city has been remarkable in relation to the nighttime economy bouncing back. When I speak to businesses, the big challenge they've got is the cost of doing business. And the issues of recruitment of labour and skills. I'm hoping the new government addresses both those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was looking for specific actions there. I mean, I found your manifesto pretty thin on what might benefit the nighttime economy. Perhaps the London Growth Plan with 150,000 proposed jobs, and I would hope some of that focuses on the nighttime economy. But it is a struggle. When you wrote your strategy in 2017, you spoke about people struggling to get food at 10 a.m. Now it's a struggle to get food at 10 p.m. And I think there is some obfuscation there of the scale of the problem. The only real action that I took from what you just said then was conversations with councils. And actually, if you look at that, the best opportunity to do that would be through the nighttime surgeries, which the Nights are is supposed to hold monthly. But if you look back, since 2017, there was 7 then. There was, in 2018, there was 5. 2019, 4. We'll skip COVID years, obviously. 2023, we had 6. That's not the monthly surgeries that were promised. These would be really good opportunities to be having those conversations, as you suggested.
Well, look, there were 3 million people, 3 million freelancers and others who were excluded from any support from the government during the pandemic. A lot of them worked in the nighttime economy. A lot of them got other jobs and haven't come back. So we can't escape the consequences of the pandemic. The lag is going to be long-standing. Add to that the consequences of the 2021 Brexit deal leading to those EU citizens who'd filled some of these spots not being around anymore. It creates a big challenge for these businesses. On top of that, the cost of doing business and stuff. So some of these are within our power, some of these aren't. The nighttime surgeries aren't the only way we communicate with council leaders, local businesses and so forth. It's one of the ways. But we're in regular contact with these businesses and there'll be announcements over the course of the next few weeks about some of the stuff we are doing in relation to supporting the nighttime economy. The London Growth Plan, you're right, will have an impact. Will have an emphasis in relation to hospitality, culture and creative industries, and so forth. But I don't accept the caricature in relation to nighttime economy in London. Big challenges in the past, but we've got plans in place, working with colleagues across not just the government and councils, but the private sector to address those.
I think I've constantly noted COVID as the main challenge there, so I don't think that's fair. But I'm still not noting any actions here that you can suggest to us today you're willing to take. I mean, I was hoping perhaps you might talk about opening up the local plan, lobbying the government on VAT reductions or frozen alcohol duty. You might talk about what that London Growth Plan actually included for the nighttime economy. On transport, we could have talked about perhaps looking at the fact that Thursdays are the new Fridays and how we need to address the night tube on then. We could have talked about policing and how we can make sure that police are in the right places at the right times to support the nighttime economy. Perhaps these are all announcements you have for the next few weeks then?
The announcements will be made in due course, yeah.
But right now you don't have anything positive that you can say is action that you're taking to support nightlife in London?
I've already set out, I'm happy to repeat some of the stuff we're doing to support the nighttime economy short of the announcements we're due to make.
You didn't set out anything apart from saying that you were going to have conversations with councils, pretty much. That was all I noted. I mean, I don't...
So some of the things that we're doing to address the problems raised with us by those who work in the nighttime economy is to support them in relation to labour and skills shortages. That includes the work of the AEB sector. That includes the work of the London Growth Plan. That also includes the work of lobbying for more skills devolution to London. Another area we're working to support the nighttime economy is in relation to the cost of doing business in London. The abolition of business rates will make a big difference in relation to one of the big costs that businesses have, replacing it with a scheme that is fairer. One of the things I'd like to see is the business rates, small business relief extended, so because the cap doesn't apply as much in London as it does to other parts of the country. Another lobbying ask of the government is in relation to the replacement scheme for business rates to be fairer to London businesses, being a big challenge. We're looking at other things we can do to support the nighttime economy. The issues that she's mentioned in relation to VAT, duty and so forth, the stuff that's on my public record, saying that I support and lobby in the government for. There's nothing new there. The London Growth Plan will have a support we can give to this part of the sector. Culture is the fastest growing sector in the London economy, and the nighttime economy is integral to that sector. Another part of the nighttime economy is the health service. And I think some of the announcements that will be made over the course of the next few weeks by the Secretary of State will be supporting that nighttime economy. I've already mentioned the lobbying of the government in relation to more support for the police.
Mr Mayor, you started well, but you are tailing off into just saying buzzwords now. And I will give it to you. The question was, because I wanted to understand your plans, because we do have a round table next week, and I wanted to understand your plans. And I agree, you did start off with telling me your plans, but you have reined into just saying buzzwords around culture, not talking about nightlife, and so I think it's best to stop your train of thought there.
So here's the issue, Chair. No, here's the issue, Chair.
I mean, if you'd like to say actual things that you're implementing on nightlife,
it's not even a flourish.
Allow the Mayor to finish, please.
Look,
Assembly Member.
So I was trying to give short answers last time, and I was criticised by the questioner for not answering a question. So I gave a longer answer, and I'm criticised for answering too long. You can't have it both ways. What is it? I can give a longer answer if she wants it, Chair.
I think that's the next question.
No, I don't think it is. I thought the Mayor had a very well-considered answer. I thought I was stopping him from going into a train of thought that he was losing the thread on, and he was starting to go into buzzwords. He said he wanted to continue, and then he didn't.
I'm wondering...
I was waiting. Apparently he wanted to continue his answer and hasn't said anything since.
I think... that intervention is...
I don't know if it is. If the Mayor wants to finish his answer, I'm giving him the opportunity.
It doesn't look like the Mayor wants to...
Well, then it clearly couldn't have been that great an intervention, and I think I was right to intervene and tell him that he was just going off the cuff.
Thank you. I think we're going to move to the next person. Is Assembly Member Bakari.
Child poverty can be reduced immediately by scrapping the 2 child benefit cap. Will you be writing to this next government as you did with the last?
The audacity, the co-architects of austerity. Look, in 2010, a choice was made.
Answer the question, please, Mr Mayor. Do you believe in scrapping the 2 child benefit cap or not?
It's a fair question.
In 2010, a choice was made.
Please answer the question.
In 2010, a choice was made.
Do not look at the Labour AMs. Please answer my question.
And Lib Dem, by the Conservative and Lib Dem government, who should be ashamed of themselves
you
to
should
bring in
be
austerity.
Pushing your
austerity
government
was a choice
to scrap
made by the Lib Dems and the Conservatives.
Benefit
and the
cap.
chutzpah
There is no need to be cross with me about this. I'm just asking a simple question.
You are the co-architects of austerity.
Order.
Thank you for your angry response. That was very clear.
Order, please.
The answer was not.
It is clear. It is clear that the Lib Dems are now out of time. It is also clear that the Mayor did not really answer that question. But we'll move on to the next contributor.
They don't like hearing about austerity, do they, Chair? A bit like the Tories.
The next question is about fire safety regulation. It's in the name of Assembly Member Clark.
Thanks for the question. We owe it to those who lost their lives in the Grenfell Tower fire and to the bereaved and survivors to ensure we have a robust building safety regime so that such a tragedy never happens again. I was pleased to see the Labour manifesto commitment on this. The previous government fell short of meeting the wider challenges posed by unsafe buildings. My London Plan now sets the benchmark for fire safety, requiring developments to achieve the highest standards of fire safety. I hope the new government will introduce improvements to regulatory and testing regimes so that everyone living in a high-rise building can have the confidence that they're safe. The previous government failed to act on recommendations from the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 1 report, which recommended personal emergency evacuation plans, PEEPs, for vulnerable residents. This is an area which the new government will want to look at. The government must also consider the Phase 2 report of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, which is due to be published in September. London accounts for around 65% of the entire national high-rise residential risk, and many high-rises in London come with complex fire safety designs for evacuation regimes. The sheer scale of the number of high-rises in London is a great challenge for the London Fire Brigade in terms of resourcing of qualified inspecting officers and fire safety teams to carry out the work required. Finally, the government also want to consider how to tackle the risk posed by lithium-ion batteries in e-bikes and e-scooters, which the members has raised assiduously over the last few years, which will be one of the greatest emerging fire risks in London. As she'll be aware, because of her lobbying, we're now aware that e-bike fires have risen from 3 in 2020 to 143 in 2023, with sadly 3 people dying as a result.
Thank you very much for your answer. And I just wanted to also congratulate you on all your work ahead of both elections, but this one where I saw you campaigning with so many people who got on to be elected. I was delighted to see you out with ministers many times since the election, and part of that shows me that the government are taking a real interest in London, and that leads on to safety, fire safety, building safety, all of these areas where we have a lot of expertise in London. We have a lot to share with the government. Just thinking about the previous FREP committee and now the Fire Committee, we have lots of information, lots of shared experiences from people who've been involved in fires, but also firefighters themselves. And I'm glad you highlighted the shortcomings of the previous government with in regards to the Grenfell fire report and recommendations, because it isn't good enough that while London has met Phase 1 recommendations, the national government has not, and that really does need to happen. How do you plan to work with this government in regards to fire safety?
The really important thing is this is an issue that affects the entire country on fire safety, whether it's e-bikes, e-scooters, to tall buildings, to the consequences of climate change. And I hope the government will understand that actually the London Fire Brigade does some things really, really well. And one of the things in the past London has not done is share best practice, and also share best practice from around the country. In answer to the previous question, I explained the work LFB is doing in relation to wildfires, listening to other colleagues around the country and around the world. I think we need to do the same in relation to other issues where it's relevant, but the same way we've got to provide expertise to other parts of the country. Andy Rudd does a great job sharing practice across various boards that he sits on and stuff, and I'm hoping the government will act as the ringmaster, making sure that we can support each other, whether it's joint procurement, whether it's joint training, whether it's learning lessons from each other.
I'm going to flourish a little bit, if I may, but there will be a question. In regards to e-bikes and e-scooters, as you've mentioned, as being an emerging risk, it's a very real risk. Part of it is poor quality housing. So it's poor quality HMOs where people are, maybe in the gig economy, they have poor quality housing. They're charging their bikes overnight, and it's a systematic failure. And I think that there's an injustice of housing that goes alongside of housing safety that goes alongside this. With the London Fire Brigade had the Charge Safe campaign, which they said it repeatedly in committees in this chamber, that while they're very happy to carry on campaigning and they very much appreciated our support from this chamber, they really needed regulation. And just as the government has banned, in the King's Speech there was a banning of zombie knives, I'd very much like to push for early action on e-bikes and e-scooters, on the regulation of retrofit kits and less safe bikes, and I'm just hoping you will support us on that.
So the lobbying in relation to the zombie knives and so forth has been years and years and years. I remember raising it with the government in 2016. And they did announce they would do it, and they never did do it over the last 8.5 years. I'm really pleased it's now in the King's Speech. You're right, we've got to raise with the government the issue of changing regulation around the ability to purchase dangerous e-bikes and e-scooters. A lot of it's because the online is unregulated. Often these are things bought from overseas in brown packaging that nobody can see and stuff. But we do need to do more in relation to retailers, physical and also online as well. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with the member about what we can do to work with the LFB to put in an ask of the government that we can achieve.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns fixing the NHS, and it's in the same name of Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. I'm delighted that the new government has made a commitment to fix the NHS and build a health service that's fit for the future. That's going to require fundamental reform and will take some time. But I'm pleased to see the new government being bold and committed to deliver real change alongside additional investment. 14 years of neglect and lack of investment have brought the NHS to its knees, with many Londoners struggling to access the care they need. Waiting lists are catastrophically high, with well over 1 million Londoners waiting for treatment. Accident and emergency waiting time targets haven't been met since July 2015. The NHS is crumbling, and the last government broke their repeated promise to build 5 new hospitals in London. The current model isn't fit for the future. It's geared towards late diagnosis and treatment rather than the prevention of ill health, and Londoners need a health service, not a sickness service. This government's immediate priority is to get a grip on the record waiting list and ensure nobody waits longer than 18 weeks from referral to treatment. They've also been clear that additional investment will be used to deliver an extra 2 million NHS operations, scans and appointments every year, build the workforce so the NHS has the staff it needs, including thousands more GPs and midwives, end the 8 a.m. scramble for a GP appointment by delivering a modern booking system, and ensure anyone who wants a face-to-face appointment gets one. It will take time for a new government to rebuild the NHS, but I'm confident that together we'll deliver the health service Londoners need.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So as we've heard already, the previous Conservative government has run our NHS down to such an extent that staff at Hillingdon Hospital in my constituency sometimes feel the need to apologise to patients for the state of the facilities they are receiving treatment in. And I've heard from patients over the past few months, knocking on doors in the area, how grateful they are to staff, but how they dread going into the hospital in its current state. So will you join with me in welcoming the news that this Labour government will put the money in place to deliver a new hospital for Hillingdon?
I do welcome that announcement, and it's very different from announcements made by previous governments because it's a promise that we'll keep in relation to delivering that new hospital. I heard the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care say last week the NHS is broken. That is no way to denigrate. He wasn't denigrating the amazing staff who work in the NHS, but it's a reality that many of the systems and some of the buildings and facilities aren't fit for our purpose. You will know some of the accommodation, some of the facilities used at Hillingdon were built in the war as wartime accommodation. Old wards some of the wards have become unsafe and have had to be closed to protect the patients and staff. So I can appreciate how pleased you are by the announcement and the local members of Parliament as well. And I'm hoping, as soon as we can get growth and we can, clear up the mess we've inherited, we can start making progress and more investment in the NHS and other public services.
Great to hear. Just moving on to some of the topics that we've covered a little bit earlier, but a recent visit to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Home Start Hillingdon. The audience was reduced to tears when we heard a moving story from one mother who really struggled following the birth of her baby. But she made it through that time, incredibly tough times, with the support of the charity. We know that the first 1,001 days of a baby's life are absolutely critical to its lifetime development. So what I'm asking for from you today is that you'll commit officers to work with Home Starts across London in the rollout of baby and multi-banks across the capital.
Yes, really important for me to give that commitment, which I'm happy to do. And you will know actually the work that takes place antenatal and postnatal is really important, and with young children and stuff. So I'm more than happy to give them that commitment.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Garbett, and it concerns legalising drugs in London.
Thank you for your question. We know that illegal drugs drive crime, violence, antisocial behaviour and damage Londoners' health. I support the new government's mission to take back our streets and tackle these issues through enforcement, prevention and early intervention. I've long said that we need a more robust evidence base to inform practical policy making on this important issue. That's why I set up the Independent London Drugs Commission to review the evidence in relation to cannabis laws and impacts in the UK. To be clear, the Commission is only considering the evidence around cannabis and no other substance. Due to the sheer volume of evidence with which they've been presented and the complexity of the issues they're considering, the Commission's deliberations are ongoing. The Commission will make a series of recommendations for myself, City Hall, the Government, police and criminal justice and health and care partners to consider. Changing drug laws is not within my remit, but I hope these recommendations will inform the debate on reducing the harm caused by cannabis use and supply. There's no hiding the fact that the illegal drugs trade causes huge damage to our society. Drug use costs society a total of £19 billion a year. Dame Carol Black's review found the health harm, cost of crime and impacts on wider society to be more than double that of the drug market itself, estimated to total £9.4 million a year in England and Wales alone. I established the London Drugs Forum in 2022, a multi-agency partnership that looks to tackle drug-related crime and wider harms through public health and criminal justice lenses. The forum has already strengthened our approach by getting drug workers into custody suites to provide timely interventions, as well as supporting the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities to improve London's continuity of care rate. Tackling drug continues to be a priority, and since 2022, I've invested £6 million in the expansion of Project ADA, which supports a whole system response to combating drug misuse. ADA has a presence in every basic command unit, with best practice being taken from the initial 3 sites and applied across London. This includes tackling drug-related antisocial behaviour, identifying and addressing cuckooing, and ensuring partnerships are in place to divert those in need of treatment and support services away from the criminal justice system.
Thank you for that response. I'm really excited that we're having this discussion because I think it's incredibly important. It's something that I care deeply about, and I know that you do too from the things you've just spoken about. But just to say that it's not the fact that drugs are illegal that makes all of those things terrible. It's the fact that we've got an illegal drug trade. And the only way to properly address drug death, exploitation and the billions of pounds spent on enforcement is to legally regulate the trade, supply and access to drugs and put them in the hands of health professionals. I know this from the work I've done in the NHS and public health. You promised your commission back in 2021, which is brilliant. It's great that that will make recommendations to the government, but it hasn't made any difference to anybody's life yet. And I really want to know when the Drug Commission will be making its recommendations and when it will make a difference.
So the work we're doing with the London Drugs Forum is already making a difference to people's lives. Project ADA is already making a difference to people's lives. The Drugs Commission is a report they will do. The difference they will make will depend on whether those recommendations are accepted or not. I don't know what the recommendations are going to be. I've not met with the chair for some time. And so I have to wait and see what those recommendations are. You're assuming, and for good reason, that the Commission will chime with your views on this. I've got no idea whether they will.
I know they've taken a broad base of evidence, and the evidence is really strong that the enforcement of drugs has failed, and we know that it disproportionately affects young black people. It's well documented that we need a different approach. So it would be good to know when that commission will be here. Will it be by the end of the year?
I've just got to emphasise again, it's not looking at drugs per se, just cannabis. I'd be disappointed if it wasn't this year.
Great, that's really good to hear, and actually brings me on to my next question, which you've alluded to, that it's only about cannabis, and although that's incredibly important, we know, and I've heard from families who've lost friends and family members due to opioid overdoses, and people who work in this field. I went to visit a harm reduction hub last week. It's been crowdfunded by the community. They managed to raise the money within a week, showing how strong the feeling is for people to have alternative ways of accessing health provision and to reduce drug deaths. We know that there was 477 people who died from drug poisoning in 2022, which is 4 times higher than the number that have died from knife violence. And I'm not comparing those for the reasons of just being alarmist or, you know, undermining the knife violence deaths, but it's just bringing the attention that we bring to knife violence, and we need that in drug deaths. It would be an extension of your right care, right person approach to take a public health approach. So I'm really keen to hear if you're going to implement the Health Committee 2022 recommendation to have an overdose prevention centre, and follow in the footsteps that we've seen Glasgow taking.
Can I suggest this is an issue that the London Drugs Forum should respond to? Because obviously Dr. Tom Coffey and Deputy Mayor Sophie Linden look into a whole host of issues with partners. The great thing about the forum is it's multi-agency partners. And so can I, Chair, with your permission, take this away and ask them to respond to you in relation to the important point you made. And by the way, I didn't take it in any way you're trying to, trivialise knife crime. I understand the reason why you mentioned that figure.
Yeah, that would be brilliant, because I just think, the government is failing to take action, which is why the community have had to step in. And I think the fact that so many people are dying from overdose in our city, as well as we've seen the synthetic opioids coming into the supply, making it more and more toxic. So I know that this is something that we need to be acting on. I know that the Deputy Mayor is talking to the coroners about making sure the data is accurate, but we just need to make sure that we're seeing these changes. There's a lot of talk, but not very much action at the moment.
Yeah, so I'll follow this up with London Drugs Forum, and she'll also be pleased to know that they're also doing some work with nightclub and festivals. You'll be aware of the issue in relation to there and stuff, in relation to support that can be given there. So I'm more than happy to take this away and for them to speak with the member to discuss how we can take this forward.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr Mayor. I just want to quickly talk about this Drugs Commission. You've been very clear to say it's not about drugs, it's about cannabis. But we have to remember that legal drugs also cause a great deal of harm in society. I myself lost my brother to alcoholism. I've worked with a number of young people who've been murdered because of the drug trade. And I want to make sure that in your estimation and your reply to drugs, that you're taking into account the class aspect of this as well, because it is poor communities, largely black communities, that will suffer from the legalisation of drugs, from our mental health, from our children getting involved in drug gangs, etc. So can you guarantee me that we are not only speaking to the usual suspects, often middle class people who want to legalise drugs, but you're also speaking to people in those communities actually affected by drugs who don't want to legalise?
Yeah, thanks for your question and the way you raised it as well. I'm not on the Commission, but what I'll do, Chair, is make sure they see the comments made by Lord Bailey in relation to the really important counsel he's given them about who he speaks to and addressing the issue in relation to socio-economic factors as well, if that's okay.
Thank you. And the other question is about mental health. So the idea is if drugs are legal, all of the harm will go away. That simply isn't true. Mostly young people are, mental health is affected by cannabis. So if you look at least the lowest estimate I've seen is that 15% of young people who smoke would have adverse mental health effect. I've seen higher estimates that say 30-35%. The point being, younger people, largely in black communities and poorer communities, would be exposed to something that's legal but is very damaging to their health. Could we also make sure that's a very, very big part of the conversation? Because often people who are advocating for these drugs come from a social background that would defend them from many of the poor outcomes.
Chair, again, I mean, I'll pass the comments. So, I mean, I've not practiced law for 20 years, but I remember dealing with cannabis-induced psychosis more than 20 years ago, and it's a common phenomenon that I'd be astonished if the Commission weren't aware of. And so, but I'll make sure just, crossing T's and dotting I's that they're sent your comments so they're well aware of that.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Assembly Member Duval, please.
So we on this side want to echo and support some of the comments that Lord Bailey made in terms of harm to community. There is a difference between legalisation of drugs to declassification, but the important thing that was said earlier, which I can agree with my colleagues, is that we need to have the debate and it needs evidence-based. But we must always remember the harm and distress caused to sections of our communities that are not always have the support networks that others have, do not come from backgrounds where they can cope with the outcome and implications of long-term misabuse of drugs. And so that's why I think the debate is important, but also we need to get the language right. But we're not talking about, no one's talking about, and to be very clear, no one will be talking about this for some time, because I think the first part of the debate is around declassification of whether it's criminal processes or civil processes for certain actions of it. How do we protect some of our communities from new and emerging drugs on our streets that have been misused by people as well? So I think we just want to make it clear on our side where we're coming from, not wishing to close down the debate. It's very important, and also supportive of some of the work that various members have said that needs to be tackled alongside this issue. But, we need to be very careful with this debate, but we should have it, and we need to think very carefully about any outcomes that we receive from the commissions.
Yeah, can I thank the member for those comments? I mean, I think the sensible thing for me to do maybe to send the entire start of the question from Senator Mugabe to Senator Devell's question to the Commission, so they can see the sort of issues that have been raised. What I would say is the huge advantage the Commission has is they'll be able to see across the globe where they've made changes in relation to cannabis laws, and the consequences, positive and negative. And that goes to Lord Bailey's point as well, because I think some of the points he raised have been seen in some of the countries where they've made changes around cannabis law. And so I get the point in relation to the disproportionate impact on some communities versus others. So, Chair, with your permission, can I arrange for the transcript of this exchange to be sent to the Commission, and I'm sure they'll be received in the spirit they're intended.
Assembly Member Garbutt, please.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really helpful, and just to add the important perspective of how the stigma of drug use currently means that people don't seek the help that they want to get. Like, I've spoken to families where children and their friends are worried about seeking help or calling ambulances because of the fact drugs are illegal and not legally regulated. So if that could also be incorporated, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
On the last point, yes, it can, but I'd also ask the London Drugs Forum to look into that as well, because that's something we can address now in relation to that issue, as well, in relation to the response of the medical services to people who may not want to receive those services for a variety of reasons.
If we can go on the clock now. It's getting to sound like a referral to the London Drugs Forum. Sounds a bit like kicking into the long grass. One action that you could take straight away to reduce the harm on Londoners, especially young Londoners, is to follow what the Assembly decided in a motion on the 22nd of February, and that is provide funding to set up 2 drugs testing centres which allow people to have those possibly contaminated drugs tested, and also therefore open the door to them for other services that may support them, perhaps those people who also have an addiction issue. Could you undertake to consider that, or are you happy for Bristol to lead the way, who have already established such a centre at a very reasonable cost to the taxpayer?
It's worth just sharing, thanks for your question, it's worth just sharing with colleagues what exactly the London Drugs Forum is. It's not simply City Hall colleagues, it's colleagues from criminal justice, health agencies, the Met Police Service, OHID, Home Office, local authorities, probation and prisons, the voluntary sector, and those with lived experience, expertise on the London Drugs Forum. I am happy to ask them to look into the Bristol experience, to see the pros and cons, and for them to look into whether there are lessons we can learn from Bristol.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the next question, and it concerns the new government and the GLA budget, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Thank you very much for your question. I welcome the commitment in the Labour manifesto to offer councils multi-year funding settlements alongside the ending of wasteful competitive bidding programmes. Following the meeting with the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Metro Mayors last week, I'll regularly meet with the Government through the new Council of Nations and Regions, as well as holding meetings with Secretaries of State and key ministers as we develop funding plans for 2025 and 2026 and future years. I anticipate the Government will announce further details on any plans to deliver multi-year settlements later in the year. The previous Government has not provided a multi-year settlement since 2015 spending review, which expired in 2019. This has meant local authorities, fire, police and transport bodies have been unable to develop long-term plans for revenue and capital investment. A key priority for London will be to deliver a long-term capital settlement for TfL and for the GLA's affordable housing programme, alongside greater certainty for the Met Police Service and London Fire Brigade funding. The GLA receives funding annually through retained business rates plus Home Office grant for policing, so more certainty around these significant funding streams would make a big difference to our long-term planning. The welcome pledge to replace business rates with a fairer property tax that reduces the burden on small businesses represents an opportunity to look at how local and regional government is funded in the longer term.
Thank you very much for that response, Mr Mayor. And you kind of touched on it a bit, but are you expecting any funding settlement that's forthcoming for the GLA to cover the TfL and the police?
So as you'd appreciate, those are issues that will be at the fore of my mind when I meet with the respective Secretaries of State. It's an issue I already raised with the Transport Secretary. So if you think about the big pots of support we need. One is the GLA directly. Two is TfL Capital, Met Police Service, London Fire Brigade as well, affordable housing programme, and adult education. Those are the big ticket items. Those are the areas where we like multi-year settlements, which gives us certainty. We save the taxpayer money. We save everyone money by the ability to plan forward and stuff. And it means that we can provide better governance as well.
Thank you for your response. And then just on business rates, what changes would you suggest the government make to ensure that the system of taxation works for businesses in London?
I think the key thing that we know is business rates as a system is broken. The number of businesses that complain that they can't, serve their community because of the overheads with business rates and stuff means that, getting rid of that is really important. What I'd like to see is a system where councils don't receive less money as a consequence of a change. Are really important because they need those receipts to do good stuff. We want to make sure that the small business rates relief benefits London businesses where the rateable value is higher, so they're not eligible sometimes for the relief. We want to add burdens on councils when it comes to collecting, or the burdens they have to collect business rates is really important. I think the big thing businesses complain about is they don't see the benefits of the rates they pay locally. So there's some way of local communities, businesses benefiting from the receipts they pay. I think that will engender greater confidence in paying them as well. But look, we'll be responding to the government when it comes to a replacement of business rate scheme. We'll be asking businesses in London to let us know what ideas they'd like to see in the new, business rates 2.0 or whatever it's going to be called going forward. But it's really important that the business rates is abolished as it is and replaced with a better system.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to prepare. We've got a standing order. Will the Assembly agree to suspend Standing Order 2.9b in order to allow the remaining business on the agenda to be completed? I hope that wording works. It's briefer than usual. So we've now got the question on now is new homes in London, and it's from Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, in your in your manifesto, you pledged. Oh, what's going on?
Chair, let me go first.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. A little bit eager on my part. Excuse me.
I wondered what was happening there. It's very strange.
Super keen to talk to you. That's all it is.
I hope this is an example of you preparing your response before you've heard from the Mayor.
Not at all.
Okay.
Chair, let me spare blushes and answer the question. The net number of new homes completed reached 45,700 in 2019-2020, the year before COVID, and its impact hit. I'm told this is likely to be the highest figure seen in London since the 1930s. I've consistently met the government's affordable housing targets. Chair, at the time, I'm happy to take the supplementary and I'll send in the written answer to see. Otherwise, we won't get a chance to ask the question.
What it really is, I just want to ask you, will you be setting annual targets around these 44? I accept that the climate has been reasonably difficult in the recent past, but will you be setting targets into the future around how you're going to deliver this 40,000 homes by 2030, I believe it is?
No, we don't set annual targets. What we do is that the government doesn't set annual targets. The government sets a period. Mm-hmm. It could be 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, and that's the way the government works, because they appreciate the time it takes, land allocation, applying for permission, so forth, so forth. So, no, we're not going to be setting annual targets over and above what we already do, which is publish what we've done in that year, starts and completions.
I understand the government doesn't set them. I was more interested in would you, City Hall, be setting them, just so that we can get an idea of the pace, because I accept that in the early years there wouldn't be as many as there would be towards the end. But do you have a pace in your mind?
So the problem with City Hall targets is they get criticised by our opponents. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I announced that we'd met our target for council homes. And actually, it was the chair that criticised me for saying, well, he's marking his own homework. He set his own target. The good news for me was 2 weeks later, we met the government target. We'd made him look stupid. So that's why we've got to be a bit careful about City Hall targets. So we like government targets because they're third party. We like targets set by the London Plan because that's third party, but I think our targets are over a period of time, over a middle term, or up until the end of this decade.
I doubt Andrew ever looks stupid. My point is just being it's a case of scrutiny to help push you along to deliver. Because what I'm after is now you have the scenario that you have dreamed of. You have you as mayor and you have your chum as a prime minister. What will you think will happen differently to deliver us more? Because last year we had a record low delivery. We can all agree the need is as high as it's ever been, if not higher. I'm trying to get a feel for what you will do differently. I accept that you've tried and what new tactics do you want to add to your suite of things that you're already doing?
Well, there's already some big changes in the first 13 days. So the government has a target of 1.5 million new homes. The government will ensure that local authorities have got targets, which is really important in relation to the levers we have over local authorities. The government's also said that London's got a key role to play in relation to growth and recognises housing leads to growth. Those are all good signs in relation to us being able to build.
I'm going to have to ask you to bring your comments to a close on that, Mr. Mayor, because the GLA Conservatives are now out of time. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. And I can appreciate that Lord Bailey's genuine interest in developing housing across the capital, but I wanted to ask you, do you think that all London boroughs are treating the housing crisis with the same seriousness it warrants? And I just want to give you some context as an example of the two boroughs that I represent to reflect what I feel is a clear contrast. So between 2016, when you got elected, in 2023, Labour-run Ealing completed 4,171 homes, whilst neighbouring Tory-run Hillingdon completed just 971, less than a quarter. And in terms of responding to the exponential growth in temporary accommodation that we've heard so much about this today, Ealing has allocated £150 million worth to purchased homes that can be brought into use to support those families who are finding themselves homeless for the first time in their lives.
So in preparation for Lord Bailey, I always get a table of housing starts across boroughs. It's not just Hillingdon that's poor. The others that spring out at me are Havering is poor, Bromley is poor, Bexley is poor. There are others that are not great either. And so the government actually, naming and shaming these councils in a way that I've not been able to succeed in doing, but also taking away the responsibility from them, if they don't, is an incentive to pull their finger out and get homes being built for local residents.
So what would you like to see from the government to ensure that there is a more equitable distribution of new homes to support Londoners right across every part of this borough, every part of the capital?
Being crude, it can't just be the responsibility for Labour councils to meet the housing needs of London. Now, of course, I'm very excited that 21 of them, or 32 are Labour. It's great for Londoners. But that's not fair. They have to carry the burden of not just their own residents, but those in the other 11 boroughs as well. And by the way, some of the Lib Dem boroughs in South West London aren't much better. And so if those councils, if councils aren't willing to do their bit to build the homes Londoners need, the government should take away their powers from them and either give it to City Hall, which is the ideal, or CLG.
And just finally, there's building homes and there's building genuinely affordable homes, which is really important. Making sure that when those boroughs do then are building those homes, that making sure that they are actually within the affordability rates that, as we define them, rather than as the previous Conservative government defined them.
But also you've got some really shocking behaviour from some councils, poorly led, who allow developments in their patch with very little affordable housing. We often have to take it in because they've been poor at negotiating and get more affordable housing. So actually one of the ideas the government's got about more planning officers will help those councils, as long as the political leaders don't stymie the advice from planning officers. They're sort of NIMBYs you've got leading some of the councils. Hopefully when they spend time on the Assembly, they'll get some experience about running things properly.
Chair.
I feel there should be a right for response because
there
was clearly a reference to Richmond.
He didn't name you.
If the mayor didn't interfere,
sorry, Assembly Member.
We would build more
sorry,
houses.
Assembly Member. There is no right to reply. The mayor didn't mention you, refer to you, and that's the only way you would have in.
He pointed. If you'd been looking, Chair, he pointed.
Yeah, it's a good try, Assembly Member Roberts, but it's failed.
Chair, he does protest too much.
It's failed.
What if he refers to my constituency?
Yes,
Which was joint
Assembly
Labour,
Member.
by the
You
way.
have no chance. You know, I am an ecumenical abuser. So it's right. Assembly Member Duval.
Thank you, Chair. There's lots of problems about providing new homes for London. One of those is capacity. The government has rightly identified the lack of planning officers in terms of that. What's your view on that particular issue, the capacity issue? What would speed up some of the issues in London, given our experience to date around some of those issues?
I'll give you. That's a really good, important question. I'll give you one example. When we managed to persuade the government to change the affordable housing programme to allow us to use some of the money to allow councils to build council homes, and I thank the previous government for doing so. Councils told us we've got no expertise about building council homes. We've lost it all. We've not done this for ages. But also the cuts over the last 14 years have meant we've let those staff go that we did have, because it's really important we're able to do the statutory services we're required to do by law. And that's caused a real problem in relation to council's ability to negotiate with developers, the timelines they've got to meet, the advice they provide, and so forth. So it really is important we support those councils. The planning officers make a difference. We've tried to do our bit with public practice, seconding into councils' expertise. 3/4 stay in the council, which is great news as well. I'll give you another example of the problems that there have been that will make a big difference. Assembling land locally, it's a nightmare. Going through CPO is a nightmare. You've got good partners who want to work with you as a council, but it's a problem in relation to that. Other pieces of land where somebody's been, a block to housing development, and so making it easier to assemble land will make a big difference. The ability to borrow. Why can't you borrow against an asset that's going to rise in value? So there's all these sorts of technical issues. The ability to use right to buy receipts with grants. And so there's lots of simple things you can do without necessarily increasing the amount of money you spend. Planning is another example. Making it easier to give permission, fewer reasons to appeal. So there are things that we think the government can do pretty quickly.
Now, one of the issues in speeding up some of the housing development issues could be the use of mayoral corporations. Not wishing to put on the spot where would you put them in London. I think there's some sites that pick out themselves that require attention. But the lead-in time to develop mayoral development corporations in certain parts to help speed up some of this process. What's the early thinking that you would have done about that, or is that you're waiting for the lead from central government? What would you think about? Is there a role for them, or is it one where it's just left to local government?
No, development corporations, enterprise zones are fantastic on paper. The issue is planning and delay. I'll give you an example. You're passionate about extending the DLR to Thamesmead, right? Because that will allow tens of thousands of homes to be built, jobs to be created. If the government said yes today, it will still take us 8 years at the earliest to get that DLR open. Why? Not because of the length of time to construct, to get a development consent order, to go through planning and so forth. So the planning changes, making it easier, is going to be such a game changer if we can do it. And rather than people blocking construction, infrastructure, and housing, you have a situation where that would engender a can-do attitude as well. And by the way, that will lead to more foreign direct investment. That will lead to more investment from the private sector. So rather than it all coming from the state, which we can't afford to do because of the mess of the last 14 years, we'll leverage in private sector investment as well.
And one of the problems that we had at Old Oak, if I recall, it may have moved on, was about government, because it was government land, Department of Transport issues, needing to make decisions on their own land before our Mayoral Development Corporation could make it up and for government and for London. Do you know what I mean? It is those. So do you think it should be, in theory, we should be able to overcome those problems much quicker if we can get government to make its decisions on its land quickly that allows us to do what we need to do?
Spot on. So you need everyone working together and having the same objective, really important. But the old comment provides me with another problem, the capacity of the grid. So I remember meeting Kwasi Kwarteng when he was the energy minister, saying, listen, the grid we need to ensure there's enough energy for that development, because at the moment the developers are saying there's not enough energy for that development. You've now got a Secretary of State in that department, Ed Miliband, who understands the challenge and will massively increase grid capacity as well. Again, another example of planning, enabling renewables, whether it's onshore, offshore or solar, being able to power those big developments. But it was a nonsense in relation to network rail land, TfL land, private land, council land, and the ability to assemble. That should be much easier than it currently is.
So, putting you on the spot, not asking for the exact date, when will you be able to share with the Assembly the housing plan for the future? We've got the housing plan now. We've got a change of government, which means some of that detached. We're still going to have some of those problems to overcome. When do you think you're going to have a new conversation with the Assembly about your plans for London with your partners, about moving forward on some of the key strategic sites?
Well, the good news is we know everything's changing. We know that because the King's Speech had 40 bills in there. Many of them around growth, housing, planning, English devolution, transport, all of which are integral to the area that the members are talking about. I'm hoping but in autumn we'll have a better idea of what's going to be in the bills. At the moment, all we know is what the bills are going to be. We've got no idea what's going to be in these bills. We're going to try and feed in relation to what we'd like in the bills, and if the Assembly want to feed in ideas they've got, I'm always willing to hear great ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Assembly Member Moema, please.
Thank you. I'll really briefly just piggyback off what Assembly Member Duval has talked about. I wanted to ask you about previous comments you made about the possibilities that a multi-year funding deals would offer, not just around housing but also around transport. I think of the schemes that we have talked about, that Transport for London, for example, are bringing forward to build homes on their own land, kind of juxtaposing that with the defence of car parks, which for some reason is still ongoing in the public sphere in some areas. And just in my own constituency, we've got Leighton Mills, which has capacity to provide 5,400 new homes. That is at the edge of the now soon-to-be former Olympic Park. I just wondered, in the time that we have left, if you could talk about what potential there is for those land assembly zones and those development corporations to really bolster development.
I mean, the requirement to have local growth plans is really important, because each local authority and mayor will be required to draft a local growth plan, which the government's going to sign off. Now, it's very difficult for you to achieve your objectives in a growth plan, a local growth plan, unless you're having a can-do attitude in relation to getting growth. And housing and the support that goes around housing is one of the best ways to get growth. For on average, every one home build, you create 2 additional jobs. Give you an idea. So it's a virtuous circle in relation to home building. Plus, it helps constituents like yours and mine.
Bring your comments to a close, as this City Hall Labour are now out of time. Before I free you, Mr Mayor, I thought you'd like to join with the rest of the Assembly in welcoming a former Assembly member to the public gallery, Peter Fortune MP. And it's the first time he's been here since his demotion. Yeah. So our sympathies are with him, I'm sure, at this time.
Can it also be noted it's the first time that I've been nice about him?
Yes. I certainly can't remember a time in the past. Thank you, Mr Mayor. You're free to go. Can I ask the Assembly to agree the motion which is set out on the agenda in my name, which is that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked?
Agreed.
Can I ask the Assembly to note the revised mayoral decision-making in the GLA and financial regulations document as approved by the mayoral decision MD 3274?
Noted.
Oh, which one of you's read that? Come on. Anyway, Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you do. Actually, I'm sure you do. So the future meetings of the Assembly, can I ask the Assembly to agree to use the 5th of September 2024 plenary meeting principally to hold a question and answer session on the work and policies of the Transport for London, and under Section 61 of the Greater London Local Authority Act require Sadiq Khan in his capacity as the Chair of Transport for London and Andy Lord, Commissioner Transport for London, to attend from 10 a.m. to answer questions for which notice will be given in due course in accordance with Section 62 of the GLA Act 1999.
Agreed.
One big breath. And can I ask the Assembly to agree in relation to urgent matters only, a general delegation of authority in respect of the Assembly's powers and functions, apart from those that cannot under the Greater London Authority Act 1999 be delegated, be given to me as Chair of the Assembly in consultation with the Chairman of the GLA Oversight Committee, party group leads and relevant committee chairs from the close of this meeting until the next meeting of the Assembly, which will be the plenary meeting on the 5th of September.
Agreed.
So that was a massive power grab, and you didn't even notice it. You didn't even notice it. I'm in charge now. The date of the next meeting of the London Assembly will be the plenary meeting, which will take place at 10 a.m. on the 5th of September. There are no other items I consider urgent, so that's the meeting closed.
Yeah.